This meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
Hi, Braden. Well, thank you for participating in the Federal Interagency Military Spouses Career Expo featuring 15 federal agencies. This session is being hosted by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And for this afternoon session, your microphone has been muted upon entry to the meeting. The meeting host will prompt you to activate your microphone to speak during the Q&A session. Your video feed is fully active as your hosts are able to see you. So please use the chat area to direct questions, comments, or remarks to the agency's representatives. All of the afternoon sessions will be recorded, and the recording links will be emailed to all attendees in the days following today's event. PDF files of today's presentations will also be emailed as the federal agencies provide them. As we near the end of this session, your host will encourage you to leave this meeting and join any one of the other 15 meetings that are about to start. And at that time, feel free to exit this meeting and click on the Zoom link for the next federal agency you wish to visit. If you prefer to stay in this meeting, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions or need assistance, click on this morning's general session Zoom link you used to join us where Will Help is standing by. And now I would like to welcome Shawnee Dalam and Glenice Allen of FEMA to provide you some opening remarks for this meeting session.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to FEMA's presentation for the Interagency Job Fair for our veteran spouses. And we're very happy to meet you today. Glenice, can you go to the next slide? Okay. Our mission is helping people before and during and after disasters. Next slide. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, a component under the Department of Homeland Security, coordinates the federal government's role in preparing for, preventing, mitigating the effects of, responding to, and recovering from all domestic disasters, whether natural or man-made, including acts of terror. Currently, we have 21,200 plus employees with 44.1% minorities, 50.3% female, 11% disability, and 14.9% veterans. And our administrator is Deanne B. Criswell. Next slide. All emergency and major disaster declarations are made solely of the discretion of the President of the United States, but only after a request has been submitted by the state or region. Declarations authorize the President to provide supplemental federal disaster assistance. Types of disaster declarations are emergency declarations and major disaster declarations. Next slide. When it comes to response to a disaster, FEMA coordinates with federal operations and logistics to save and sustain lives, minimize suffering, and protect personal and commercial property. Next slide. FEMA headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. At FEMA headquarters, we set policies, administer programs, develop procedures and guidance, and coordinate implementation with regions and field elements. Next slide. There are 10 regions and regional offices, plus the joint field offices, otherwise known as JFOs in FEMA. The regions implement, advocate, and provide feedback on national programs and policies, improve capabilities of state and tribal partners, and maintain awareness of incidents and potential incidents. The regions are the primary face and voice of FEMA with disaster survivors and community partners. Staff includes reservists as well as regional and headquarters staff working as a team to service individuals in their communities. Next slide. All right, now we're going to discuss the positions that are the position types that are available within FEMA. We are different than some of the other agencies because we have several different employee types. Next slide. We have the first one we're going to discuss are permanent and full-time positions. Permanent and full-time positions are competitive service jobs. This means that they are filled based on ability. The competitive process includes the application and interview. After 1 year of continuous service, PFTs gain what's called competitive status. After 3 years of continuous service, PFTs hired through the competitive process gain full career status. Next slide. Next, we have cadre on-call response and recovery employees, or CORE positions. Cadre on-call response and recovery employees, also known as CORE, are hired to work for a specific limited period between 2 to 4 years. These positions may be renewed if there is an ongoing disaster and funding is available. CORE employees are generally eligible for the same benefits as PFT employees, but do not gain the competitive status nor career tenure during their term. CORE employees can be hired under a streamlined process instead of a competitive process. And don't be intimidated by the idea of having a limited time contract. Most of the employees within FEMA fall under these CORE positions. Next slide. Next, we're going to talk about your local hires. Local hires are often going to be reservists that are divided into 23 different groups of personnel known as cadres that are organized by operational function. If you have ever been active duty or have a spouse that has worked with reservists, this is very similar to what we have in the reserve, what they had in the reserve program in the military. Each cadre is focused on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You use your skills and interests are used to determine the best cadre for you to consider. Okay, so for employment, can you go back up one? There we go. For next, we have our reservist positions. Reservists are on-call female employees that travel during disasters and emergencies. They're going to work on intermediate basis due to the irregular nature of disasters. Reservists are the main FEMA workforce during an emergency or disaster and can be hired under a streamlined process versus a competitive process. These reservists are going to be the main people that you're going to see during a disaster, and they're considered the face of FEMA. Next slide. Okay, these are some of the reserve on-call cadres that are available. As you can see from the slide, we're very broad in nature. Reservists are going to be divided into the 23 different groups that are known as cadres, and they're organized by operational functions. Each cadre is focused on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You use your skills and interests to determine the best cadre for you. Next slide. There are a variety of positions within FEMA, which range from budget analysts and grants management to program analysts, public affairs specialists, logisticians, and information technology specialists. Next slide. Garnering experience is very important when looking to and applying for a position within FEMA. Here are some opportunities to acquire some government-related work experience to help boost your resume. The Student Volunteer Employment Program employs students to work at FEMA as volunteers, unpaid, for a valuable experience directly related to their academic field of study. Students may receive educational credit for their internship. Next is the Presidential Management Fellows Program. It is for advanced degrees, master's, doctorate, or professional students that are about to graduate or recent graduates who have completed an advanced degree within the previous 2 years. The Pathways Internship Program has paid opportunities for current students enrolled in high school through graduate school. Current students must be enrolled at least half-time in an accredited high school, college, professional, technical, vocational, or trade school. If you look here, you can see that bachelor's degrees may qualify you for many GS 5 level positions. Superior academic achievement, a high GPA may qualify you for a GS 7 level position. Master degrees or law degrees may automatically qualify you for many GS 9 level positions, and a PhD or secondary level law degree may qualify you automatically for a GS 11 position. Next slide. Now, experience gained through work. When describing work experience and how it matches with job qualifications, here are a few things to consider. Use general and layman's terms when describing your work experience. Highlight the results and impact of your work. Describe quantifiable results within a task or assignment that you've completed. list certifications and training associated with those positions. A great resource for military personnel transitioning to the government workforce needing assistance with a resume is the Maryland Department of Labor Military to Federal Jobs Crosswalk website. And we can provide that in the chat. Just a second. And all right, the other ways of gaining experience can be anything from various types of community involvement. That's whether it's AmeriCorps, FEMA Corps, American Red Cross. Maybe you volunteered at local and state disasters responses, or state or local emergency management agencies. FEMA Corps is an innovative partnership between FEMA and the AmeriCorps National Civilian Community Corps, the NCC program. FEMA Corps is a unique team-based service program that gives 18 through 24-year-olds participants the opportunity to serve in communities impacted by disasters while gaining professional development experience. FEMA Corps members live, work, and travel in dedicated teams and serve for 12 months with an option to extend for a second term. They gain training and experience while providing important support to disaster survivors and communities. They also earn a modest living stipend during their service and receive an education award upon completion of the program. When preparing your resume, remember that a federal resume is different than other resumes. When putting together your federal resume, you will need to be specific about your education, your training, your experience, and you have to demonstrate your accomplishments to ensure that it covers specialized experience, state that reflects the job posting, and your statements focus on relevant experience. Also remember that federal resumes are typically not one page in length. The key is to have a lot of detail and make sure job descriptions are in chronological order. Also include keywords that help recruiters search resumes. Listing certifications and trainings are also very important. Make sure to list all your experience all of your experience. Now, this is something that's going to be important to remember. These are your non-competitive hiring authorities. This is anything from your Veterans Recruitment Authority, your 30% or more disabled veterans, Peace Corps and Peace Corps federal staff, AmeriCorps, VISTA, individuals with disabilities, and in your cases are going to be military spouses. Now, how to find a position. You can locate the full-time PFT, cadre on-call, response and recovery employees, or some reservist FEMA employees on usajobs.com or careersfema.gov. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Now I'd like to transition to our panel discussion, our question and answer session to give you all the opportunity to hear from current employees that represent different facets of FEMA. All right. Let's see. And I'm also putting that link in the chat for the federal jobs. So you can sort of transition, so you can see different ways to transition your experience. Okay. Let's see. Okay, it looks like we have quite a few people. We have Glenise Allen and Tracy Johnston on the lines. They are both military spouses that have went through the hiring process as a military spouse in the past. I don't know if I stated at the beginning of the brief, but I was dual military, so I didn't have an opportunity to go the route that many of you either have or will in the future. I think I should start off with Tracy. Tracy, are you available to turn on your camera and discuss your experience using the military spouse preference in the federal government?
Sure, please. There we go. Hello, everybody. I'm seeing if I can get my screen to go this way. There we go. Sorry, I'm driving. My day off. So I've been with FEMA since 2008. I was hired as a disaster assistance employee, whereas now a reservist that Shawnee was just talking about. how I got in was a little bit different because it was my background and through people that introduced me to the Region 3 administrator. It was based on my experience with my military high school that I went to at New York Military Academy. I was in Civil Air Patrol for 12 years and actually more than that. But it was all my experiences that they were. I am currently on the National IMAT Blue, which is the IMAT Corps that wasn't discussed, which is there's 4 teams. There's 3 permanent teams, red, white, and blue. And the gold team, which is based out of headquarters. But I was hired by them and I applied in 2014 and I've been on the team ever since. It's a little bit different for IM Corps and IMAT Corps. And like they said, military spouses don't have the veterans preference. I got it through my husband being a disabled veteran. He is 100%. So I am considered a 10-point other. So applying for jobs, just make sure that you have your DD-214s, your spouse's DD-214, your forms that needed to be filled out. I believe it's the SF-51 or 50. And there's a whole bunch of others to do. Make sure you have everything because I was stopped for a job because I didn't have every form that I needed. If you have any questions, just let me know. That's all.
Tracy, can you explain what an IMAT is to them?
Okay, it's Incident Management Assistance Team. So when there's 13 regional IMATs, which is smaller, probably about maybe 10 to 15, maybe 20 people. The national IMATs consist of 33 people that we can go out and work on. We're a mini operations team, operations planning, chief of staff, command staff. Our team lead is basically a federal coordinating officer. So they can not take over, but we blend in with the states. We're usually deployed for about 14 days after a disaster begins. So we can stabilize the situation and move on to the next. When the regional teams go out, they're usually for a flood or a small hurricane. Right now we have, I think, all 3 of our national IMAT teams out. There's some in Puerto Rico and 2 in Florida. So it's a tough job. You have to be on call 24 hours. You have 2 minutes or 2 hours to be on a phone call. And then you have to be when in the continental United States, you have to be on ground in 12 hours. And Oconus, like like Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Guam, 18 hours. So it takes away from a little bit, but I absolutely love my job. It's the best job I can have. I love it.
All right.
Yep.
And
go ahead.
No, that's good. Thank you, Tracy. And just for the audience, within FEMA, you have people that are going to be gone, at the drop of a hat, like Tracy on the IMAT. But FEMA also has another side of the house that's called FEMA. It's the Insurance Management Agency, and that's where Glenise and I currently reside. I've worked on both sides of the house. I've been lucky enough to go out with the IMATs, go out on deployments, work in what they call the National Response Coordination Center. I work in logistics. So I eventually moved to FEMA because I wanted to know more about the agency. And Glenise, can you tell them about your experience as a military spouse, whether it's here with FEMA or elsewhere with going through the job process, your current position within FEMA, and anything else you think is important for them to know about the organization?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. My military spousal career started almost 30 years ago. So I have had several opportunities to utilize the spouse preference. I started off just like some of the other presenters. I started off as a GS4 in Heidelberg, Germany, and we PCS to several different states after Germany, and which I was able to utilize a spousal preference 2 different times. Coming from Germany, I had the pleasure of utilizing it then. Most of the times with spousal preference, they're calling you instead of you calling them. So, sometimes I wanted to take a break and I didn't have that opportunity to take a break because they received my resume from me just prepping all my stuff ahead of time. So make sure that, your resume is up to date, that you're submitting whatever documentation is necessary for you when you do reach your next duty, that you're able to accept that position whenever it comes. And it's at 2 different times, I think I was on vacation outside the country, and they're like, oh, you have to reply within 24 hours and you can't say no to any of the positions. So I just accepted the positions on 2 different occasions for that. So bringing me forward now,
Lenise, I have a question. That was when you were with other agencies, not with FEMA?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I just had to make sure I understood.
Sorry about that. I was with DOD. Coming from Germany, I was with DODS, Department of Defense Dependent Schools. And after DODS, I went to Department of Defense Army. And then my other spousal preference job was Department of Defense Air Force. So I have quite some experience. I say sometimes that I speak like 4 different languages because you know how acronyms are. So I'll move myself forward to how I got to FEMA. In 2017, that was like a really historical year. That's when I think there were 3 different hurricanes that hit. And so what they did is that they went to other agencies to look for employees because we, of course, have the background check already. We have the credit card, so we had the ability to deploy with FEMA. So I got deployed with FEMA to my hometown in the Virgin Islands. And I was able to see what FEMA did, even though I had experienced FEMA before as a, oh my goodness, what is it called? As a survivor. I was able to, to really understand what FEMA did on this other side now. So moving forward, I applied for a job at FEMA from Washington State. We were living in Washington State at the time. And I got hired, traveled across country to Washington, D.C. And here I am, moving forward 4 years later. I am no longer a GS employee. I am currently a core. If you saw Shawnee's presentation, and that FEMA has all these different employee types. And I mean, like I've been here for 4 years, but this is my 3rd position within FEMA. 2 within our section that we're in right now, which is FEMA, and I work in IMRD. So some of those positions that you see, core and reservist positions, I hire for. I work directly in hazard mitigation. So we're resilience. We come in after the recovery phase. So the folks that I work with and I manage are like grants. I also have support specialists. I have some community educators. I also get to work on special projects where I do some hiring for those special projects and, send out my team to work with different disasters or disadvantaged communities. So it's a lot, she also shared that there's 23 cadres. I am trained as a disaster survivor assistant. So even though you have your main job within FEMA, you have several opportunities to work within other cadres. So as a disaster survivor assistant, I'm able to go out and do registration intake. So like I could be boots on the ground as soon as a disaster happens and registering individuals. Because of my job right now, I am not doing that, but I also still have an opportunity to do registration intake as a SWATer. So I work from home, taking registration from individuals that call our 800 number. So even though I'm not able to go out physically, I can still do that other part of my job at home. And we get overtime during disaster time. So there's like a lot of different areas that you can work in FEMA and a lot of opportunities that you can have as an emergency manager, which we all are once you are working with FEMA.
Now, Now, something she said when she was talking about how you have your reservists, you have our core employees, we have our permanent employees. Don't be afraid of that, because I retired from the Marine Corps and I had interviewed for a permanent position. I didn't get that position. What they did was because they wanted me and they needed the help, they needed the skill set that I was bringing to the table. They created a position. They found a pin. That's what they call the different positions, and they created a core position and brought me on board. I was really nervous about taking it until I understood that those 2-year appointees, a lot of people retire off of just getting their 2 years renewed constantly. I mean, because the jobs aren't going away. If anything, they're increasing because, as you see, disasters are continuing to happen. I came in working in logistics. I was there for 6 months before I was offered a PFT position. I stayed there for several years before I realized I had gotten to the highest grade I could in that department. And it wasn't that I didn't like the department. I loved the department. They were very supportive of me and my family, my spouse's position with his job. He's also a retired Marine, and he works as a state trooper. They were very supportive. The problem with me was I had gotten to a point where I knew everything I could learn in there and I couldn't grow. So I applied over in IMRD, which is how I met Glenise. And I took a promotion there. But during the time period I've been with FEMA, I moved from core to PFT. I'm back to core again. It's Either way it goes, I'm still going to be able to retire. I'm not missing anything different than when I was a PFT. If anything, me going from core to PFT and back to core has just allowed me to move a lot faster. And one thing that's great about being a core employee is that you can come in as a GS11, but you may see a job listing for job experience as a GS13. That's PFT, core, whatever. As long as you can show in your resume that you have that experience, you can apply, interview, and be accepted for that job as a GS13. That's the difference, a major difference I see between being a PFT employee versus being a core employee. As a PFT, I can't jump like that. I can only go one up or one down. But as a core, as long as I have the experience and can make it through that interview process and be accepted, I can jump a whole grade or more depending on what I'm trying to do and where I'm trying to go. And I think that that's something that can be good for those of you that are trying to get into the government and trying to get your feet settled and being able to still move around with your spouse. Because that's another great thing about FEMA is if you're here in the continental United States, some jobs may be willing to allow you to work remote, or they may say, hey, you only need to come in X amount of times per pay period. It just depends on the position and that office and what they're willing to do. But I believe from what I was told that FEMA does some of the most remote work in the federal government. Isn't that correct, Glenise?
Yeah, we do. And I mean, it can even go as far as your supervisor. If your supervisor is okay with you working remotely, they can give you that approval. And I wanted to also say too, Shawnee, when I left Department of Defense, I was a GS7. I started with FEMA as a IC, as a core 11, and I'm currently a 13. So just like she's saying, you can move up within FEMA, so it's a great agency.
Oh, go ahead, Glenise.
No, I was just saying it's a great agency to work for. Yes,
I honestly chose FEMA because I went to a lot of job fairs and everybody looked miserable. And I was like, I don't think I want to work there. I'm just being honest. I was like, those people look miserable and I don't want to be miserable with them. But when I came to the FEMA job fair, and I went to several before I really decided, I saw that people were actually really motivated and really into what they were doing. And they spoke to each other, like not like, okay, I got to speak to him because he's here. No, they actually enjoy doing things together. And we have a lot of different agents. We have a lot of different groups within FEMA. You have a women's group, what they call our FERGs. So you have a women's FERG, the Hispanic FERG, the African-American FERG. I'm on the Veterans Advisory Council, where I do like the newsletter for the veterans and spouses, and pretty much anybody who wants to join the FERG can join. It doesn't matter if you're a veteran or a spouse or not, or never even served or have family members that serve. If you want to join one of these FERGs, you can, and it allows you to get a lot of extra experience in not just understanding other people's cultures and what they're doing. And it helps you get that experience for when you go out on deployment and you may go to an area you've never been before. You have somebody to reach back to say, hey, I'm having problems getting this, getting the Native Americans of this tribe to speak to me. What am I doing wrong? You know, or, you know, I keep thinking that this is the right thing for them, but it may not be. But you have people in these groups that you can connect with that'll be like, oh, you're never going to get anywhere talking to them. I went to American Samoa and I had to realize real fast, everything goes through their tribal council. You know, everything. And they have all these little ins and outs that I would never know about as a federal employee coming from DC, except for the fact I have these groups to reach back to.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Shawnee, that, you know, like we have so much like the the employee resources that we have within FEMA are immense, because just like she's saying, when you do go out, and I can attest it to being even in the military, you know, because when you move from place to place, you don't know who you're going to meet, you don't know who you'll have to speak to, you know, so that experience, being in the military, being a military spouse, has, you know, just prepared me to come to FEMA, you know, because we do work with all these different communities. We work with all these different employment agencies. We work with all these different employee resources that we have. So your background is needed. It's a necessity, you know, and it will help you.
And I mean, I could say that even like when I came in the logistics, I realized I was surprised that a lot of some of the women that worked there, this was their first job ever, and they came to FEMA. And I was like, how did you end up here? And they're like, oh, well, I went through the spouse, you know, the military spouse hiring, and some of them just knew somebody that worked here that told them about a job. They applied and they came in the door. And FEMA is very good about training. You know, they're constantly providing you training. You know, they'll help you get on your feet, and they also have programs where you'll get mentorship. They'll show you your career path. And if you're like, you know what, I came in the door and I'm doing supply and I hate supply, but I'm interested in EO. They're like, okay, let's see what we can do to hook you up with somebody who's involved in equal opportunity and see if you can get some mentoring there. They'll pay for you to get training. They help you with college. They help you with so many things to prepare you to be the best person that you want to be in a certain job field, because you would be surprised at how many jobs that are in FEMA that you're like, FEMA does that? I hear that all the time. Well, FEMA does that? Yes, FEMA does a lot, because we have to deal with communities. We have to deal with states. We have to deal with tribes. And sometimes, in like my case, I've had to deal with other nations. It just depends on what we're doing, because emergencies do not have borders. Mm-hmm. All right. I know we've been doing a lot of talking. Does anybody have any questions? Kanitha, am I saying this right? And Kanitha, that you're right. I mean, yeah, I've had chances to go other places, and I'm really hesitant to even leave FEMA, because it was hard for me to leave logistics to come over to IMRT just because I had built, you know, you build it's almost like a family. You know, my oldest child is in the Marine Corps now. My youngest one is 4 years old. I've had a baby since I've been here, you know, and even in that, they were so supportive. When I was running out of hours and time, I was just getting people I didn't even know were sending me time, because they were like, oh, you helped me with this. And I'm like, I don't even remember that. Or, you know, I know so-and-so, and they told me you needed more time, you know, just giving you that. People here care. It's not just a place to work.
That sounds awesome. That's the kind of place I'm looking for. That is what I want. That sounds amazing. I definitely hope to see some career opportunities I can apply for.
What are you looking to do?
I'm looking to transition into HR. I'll definitely take something administrative to get me there. My degree is in journalism, but I've been fascinated with HR for quite a few years. I've been shadowing different people at my job, HR professionals. And I also have previous job experience with HR functions, just not that title on my resume. And I've been trying for several years to transition that way. And my husband told me, he was like, have you tried federal? I'm like, no, we just got married in June. So
congratulations.
Do it. Thank you. I've been trying to figure out how to, you know, just get to it, how to get federal, how to make it work. So I'm a newbie. I'm kind of lost in this situation. So I'd appreciate some help. I'm glad to be here today.
Okay. Um, I know plenty of people in HR, and I know I can tell you that FEMA can use some help in HR. So, I
Right.
mean, I've never heard them lacking in HR positions in FEMA, never. And that's whether you're working for, one of the administrators or higher positions, or whether you're working dealing with OCHICO. So there, you may have to come in the door as being an executive assistant type position to
That's
get your
fine.
feet in the door.
I'm told.
Glenise, you look like you wanted to say something.
Oh no, just I'm agreeing with what you're saying that
Yeah.
yes, HR does need help. I work with them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know anyone in that area is hiring, but that website that she provided, the FEMA.gov or USA Jobs, and just search FEMA.
It's like I know HR specialists, but I don't know anybody in that hiring realm. Let's see, opportunities in the Washington state. Oh, I saw some job listings on there in
Yeah,
that area
yeah,
today.
yeah.
Didn't you see
They
those?
recently had some in there. I think that they're looking for grants and planners in Region 10. That's Region 10.
I couldn't
Um,
remember if it was Region 9 or Region 10. I get them messed up sometimes. Hold on. Let me do a quick search and I can
Yeah,
see what I
that is Region 10. And I'm trying to think of, they're in Bothell. I'm trying to think of who would be out there.
I know Region 9 and Region 10 people seem pretty happy out there. So let's see, Washington State. Is there a particular area in Washington State? Let's see. I'm just because I'm doing a quick search, so you're gonna have to speak out loud. Let me see.
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. Are they open to remote?
Oh, it just depends on the job. But we do have remote positions. When you go into the USA Jobs and you type in like keywords where it says like job title, department, agency, in there you need to put in Federal Emergency Management Agency. And then where it says local or remote, type in remote only. Let me see. And that can show you specific remote only positions. And right now it doesn't look like we have remote only. Let me see. But
yeah, I think in
that doesn't
Region
mean
10, I think in Region 10 they go into the office over there. You're close to Joint Base Lewis McCoy.
Let me see.
So.
There is a, I'm sorry, I just found one, and this is human resources. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Hold on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I know this is a hard thing to do. It's, trying to go through the federal hiring process can be painful. Now that one's 100% remote. Let me, I spent like 18 months working through doing my transition before I retired. And I still it's a lot. I learned a lot when I started going from doing interviews with interview panels and to where I started working with these HR specialists where they were building what they call pins, which is each job, and then seeing what it requires for those jobs. It's a lot of work that goes into creating each job, and I had no idea how broad it could be. Let me see. So Washington State. Let me see. Washington. Everything always wants to say Washington, D.C. whenever you click in here. I promise it does.
I know, like I wish I did live close to Washington, D.C. I'd gladly go to the office.
Where are you located?
Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, that's right, Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see. I saw somebody was asking. I know manufactured housing is looking for some. Let me click on this one. Hold on a second. Oh, this is one of those. The person who was looking for a job in Washington State. What are you interested in? I'm looking in USA Jobs right now, so you're gonna have to speak out loud. Let's see, emergency. You were kind of breaking up. Oops, let me see, hold on a second. All right, what I'm gonna do is, because I put in Washington State and I see a grants mitigation specialist as a 9 through 12. Yeah, for a grant specialist, but there's other jobs out here that say like department location negotiable after selection. So I'm sorry. Let's see. There we go. There we go. Now, I got another question for all of you. Did you guys turn in resumes for this job fair? I'm not sure if they had you guys submit them. I'm standing in today for the actual recruiter for FEMA because he was deployed to Puerto Rico. And so that's part of why he's not here.
Yes, ma'am. I did turn in a resume, but I can't email it.
Okay. I just sent the link for the ones for Washington State. But it is not just going to show Washington State. It's going to show other ones that, you know, and it when you pull it up like that, it's because the location is can be chosen, you know, when you're being after selection. Now, let me see, is there a way for me to share my screen? Now, if anybody has questions, you can, you know, go ahead and start talking. Let's see. Kanitha, when you have a chance, take a review that that job listing for that HR specialist. Is anyone here interested in like emergency management, program analyst? Because we have a lot of positions that'll list like that, but just because I'm doing the program analyst job and it says what they call a 30, it was a 3043, Glenise, I think that's program analyst. But then you'll have an emergency management specialist. I may be doing the same thing as that emergency management specialist, or it's another 3043 out there that's doing something completely different than what I'm doing. It's just really dependent on where you are in FEMA and what the requirements are. But those are good things to look for when you go into USA Jobs, because you're going to find hundreds of jobs, not just with FEMA, but you know, through the federal government that are going to be listed like that, because those are general specialties in some cases. But they'll have, like, if you look at one 3043 and look at another 3043, you're like, these don't even sound like the same job. I have no idea why it's like that, but it is. Emergency management specialist, I've also been one of those. You know, an emergency management specialist on the FEMA side of the house, the insurance management branch, may not be the same as an emergency management specialist on the logistics side of the house. So when you're looking through these listings, you really need to look and read the requirements to make sure that you're eligible for that position. You got logisticians that are a big one that are always seem to be coming out. The things that, like, Glenise, what all specialties do you have in your guys' cadre?
So within my cadre, it has a mitigation. I start off with branch directors, management coordinators, support specialists, data integration specialists, community educators. What else do we have? Flood insurance specialists. I'm trying to think of who else I have. Grants. I have grants. I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that fall within my cadre, which is hazard mitigation.
Can you speak on any of the other cadres?
Not really. The only thing I can speak about is like disaster survivor assistance. You know, and those are mostly reservist type positions that go out when a disaster happens. So they're doing registration intake. They go into a system called WebNemis, where they input all this information, and that the system, whatever information is put into the system, that's a determination of what type of assistance that the individual will receive. So yeah, disaster survivor assistant is, I mean, with all these disasters that are going on, if you're interested in just a reservist position where you could do, it's intermittent. So you determine when you want to get deployed. You know, so that's another option that we have. So for my reservists, during the year, they do a lot of training. So you can get paid every quarter. You can get paid for 10 hours being a reservist.
That's without deploying or being activated?
Mm-hmm. That's without deploying and being activated. And it assists you in maintaining any of the, what is it called? Like if you have like any type of insurance. So if you want to maintain your insurance, all you have to do is 1 hour a pay period. So, if that's something that you're looking for, like, yeah, I want to have my own insurance, or I want additional insurance. Being a reservist, you have that type of benefit working within FEMA. So like I was saying, you get 10 hours a quarter, but when you do get deployed, so between January and say July, they do mostly training. Outside of July, when disaster season begins, especially hurricane season, they get deployed into working with these disasters. So last week alone, I deployed 13 people, and they all have different titles, but because we needed them in another title area, I deployed them out into that title area. And like I told you, we're our resilience. So we come in later on after a disaster happens. So as the disaster is phasing out of what they're doing right now, it phases into their job. So they have opportunities to extend their deployment if they want to deploy. They just can't deploy for more than 50 weeks. Because if you deploy for 52 weeks, that means that you're no longer a resident of wherever you deployed from. You now become a resident of the state that you're working in. So you'll have to start paying taxes on that.
Aren't they now protected under that new act that the president?
I don't know. I need to look into that one. Okay. I need to read into that one.
I thought they were supposed to get, I don't know if they get all
but that's if they have another job outside of this job, they can get deployed as a reservist. It's just like the reservist, the military reservist.
And that was what I wanted to bring up. I'm like, with the military reservists, you get activated, you go on deployment, your job back here, if you had another job, they can't fire you. FEMA didn't have that protections until last week. Which is it's huge, because we would have people that were like, I would love to go to Puerto Rico and help with the disaster victims out there, but I can't because my boss said if I leave, I'm fired. Right. And there was no
protection. Especially now too, for Puerto Rico, like we need Spanish speakers. I've been swatting for the last 2 weeks, and so we utilize the language line, and folks are waiting for an hour or more just to speak to an interpreter. So, if you're a Spanish or speak any language, I think that we have at least 16 languages that we can translate, and we have assistance for. So, if you speak a different language, that's something else that you could put on your resume, especially within FEMA. Even to have a passport, like Tracy said, we have territories. The United States own territories that are outside of the United States. So you will have to travel sometimes to Guam, all the way to Guam, and you have to have a passport. So those are different specialties that we look at and that we put into your deployment history, so that you're able to travel around if need be.
I'm sitting here looking on USA Jobs for FEMA right now, and I don't see, well, at least on this page, I see like public affairs. They also have places in here where you can submit your resumes for local hires, individuals with disabilities, veterans, and then like in Pennsylvania right now, they're looking for emergency management specialists, local hires. You can even come in to USA Jobs, and for like Memphis, if I come in here, I can type in Memphis, and they may not have anything with FEMA right now because, FEMA, there hasn't been any disasters in that area, but I'm going to get like hundreds of other jobs that are out there listed for Memphis. I know recently I looked, and there was something in Tupelo, Mississippi under that, that infrastructure jobs now. That's a big one for people to look at, because I've seen some remote positions there. There's also contracting specialists. If you had any contracting experience, coming in as a contracting specialist is it could be huge for you, because I'm telling you, you're not going to lack for a job, and you're going to get promoted, because the government, especially FEMA, we are all about contracts, because we only have so many people, but we need commercial contract support everywhere we go. That's whether we're setting up, to the building we're working out of, to the equipment and supplies that get there. It's all contracts. Let's
And just
see.
remember, like when you're looking at FEMA jobs, I know that you have filters on the side. If you select the military spouses job, it will take our jobs, our positions down even smaller. Whereas like they currently have like 114 jobs on USA jobs just within FEMA. If you select military spouses preference, they only have 23 jobs. So, you know, you could go wide, you could go small, you could, you know, select if that's the filter that you want, you know, just be sure that you're willing to just, you know, make your search a little bit smaller.
Yeah, and I was sitting here, I just typed in international relations. I'm trying to see what I can find.
We have a whole section in FEMA that does that.
Yeah, I would work with them when the NRCC was activated during Katrina and Irma, and
Yeah.
also when we were activated for COVID, because I had to speak to them. I was flying stuff from all over the country, and really during COVID from all over the world trying to get supplies done. So I mean, those positions become very critical for us when it's a disaster, and they do a lot of planning ahead of time too, just to be, you know, they're building relationships, they're dealing with the other agencies. It's I I don't think any of the 11s through 13s from when I first got here are still in the same position. They all move up pretty fast just because they're constantly talking to other people. I mean, they're in constant communication with people.
Yeah. And you know, Shawnee keeps mentioning the NRCC. What does that acronym mean?
Oh, I'm sorry, National Response Coordination Center, and I mention it because it's like during a disaster, as far as like headquarters goes, it's kind of the belly button for everything. There's representatives from every single agency there. You're talking to all the states. For, you know, I can be in the NRCC working logistics, and I need maritime support for whatever reason, and air support. If I have something that's going multiple legs, and then I'm looking at it and say, I'm like, you know what, this is going to an area where I saw a bunch of schools, so that means there's kids. How come they don't have any supplies for babies and infants? I can go walk in that room and within 10 minutes contact everybody I need. We can have a quick little school circle, plan it out, and I can get it fixed that fast. But it's critical that it's that fast because everything here is an emergency when we get activated. It's when I say it's an emergency, I would work some really long hours working at NRCC. I would feel relieved when I would go on deployment. I'd be like, oh, thank God, because I know I'm working for this time to this time, and nobody's asking me for anything but this right here. So I mean, here it's like it's pretty much day to day. Since COVID has occurred, I've been working from home. Um, and it's been good. I've gone into the office just to go in because I had different things going on. We might have had new employees I needed to help through the process, but they are very supportive of their employees, whether it's family oriented, disabilities. You know, they do their best to work with people.
Yeah,
Let's see.
I could agree. I just go in right now. Yeah, to
Yeah,
get out of the house.
Yeah, I miss grown-ups. So,
Yeah.
So,
like,
real quick.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Let's start with the. Sorry.
I thought you were driving, so I was trying to let you.
You can look at when they deploy. Sorry, but the NRCC is activated when there's a major disaster or an emergency that came on, like Ian and Fiona. Think of it, bring out all of the stuff that FEMA can provide. And what I do as a mission assignment manager, if FEMA can't provide it, I bring in all of the other federal agencies. So I coordinate with Corps of Engineers, EPA, HHS, the alphabet soup, if you would, is in as a joke in mission in operations. Mm-hmm. The other agencies have to come through me and the branch directors to do their job. So we tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it, how much money they have, and when bills come in, we tell them yes or no, we can pay. One of the neat things about FEMA, and people don't realize this, is that we're the only federal agency that can tell another federal agency what to do and not pay them. We haven't done that, but it's been, you have to have thick skin when you're in my position because you get a lot of no's and people screaming at you. But it's a fun job. I learn, and I'm pretty much a budget person for the other federal agencies, because if they come in and say, oh, look, FEMA's here, I'm going to have this, I'm going to use my federal funds and let FEMA pay for it. I'm also a taxpayer, so I look at that. So there's finance. Don't just look at what you have on the surface. Look at an experience for a military spouse for things that you may qualify that's hidden in the position. So don't look and do your research, if you would, to find out what the depth of, because I never knew what a mission assignment manager was. And that my experience as a disabled veteran's spouse is, learning, because I've done a lot of research and brought in other federal agencies. I know how those agencies work. So if I wanted to move out of FEMA, which I don't, I have the opportunity because of the connections that I have. So that's all.
And I can tell you, looking on USA Jobs, if for these positions, don't be intimidated. It's being able to interpret what's your experience into what they're looking for. When I first joined, one of the logisticians that were there, she does transportation. She, went to high school, went to college, got married. The only job she'd ever worked was a bus driver for her son's school, and she did volunteer work. She was able to use her experience to be able to find her way into the federal government because of the different volunteer things that she did. I think she came in originally as like a forklift driver because she had to get a forklift license for some reason for what she was doing for one of the local school districts. And that's how she ended up in the federal government. And then from there, she moved to logistics. You would be surprised at when you look at your own background and then you look at some of these things, you realize, you know what, I can do that. It's similar to what I've already been doing over here. Let's see. Oh, in middle. Hold on a second.
Hey, Shawnee, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Is
great.
You okay? Yeah,
yes, I'm back in. Apologies, I had internet issues, but I'm actually going to go ahead and ask if you can all start running through the slideshows again. I think we have a couple of new guests who may have joined. So we were supposed to start the next session at about 1:45, but we can go ahead and start it now.
Okay.
And for those who are on, you're welcome to stay, or you can check out the other Zoom meetings that are going on as well. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to stay. We're just going to go ahead and start the next session and go through our presentations again. All right.
All right. For those of you that recently joined, my name is Shawnee Dallum. I'm currently a member of FEMA. I work in FEMA and OEHP. I'm the recruiter that works for FEMA. He is currently on deployment to Puerto Rico. So he asked members of what they call the VAC, the Veterans Advisory Council, to see about getting some spouses on board. So here we are to try to see if we can help you guys learn more about FEMA and become part of our organization. So thank you for your time today. All right, the FEMA mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters. You can go to the next slide. Deanne Criswell, she's the FEMA administrator, and she runs an agency that's composed of 21,200 plus employees. We're a component of the Department of Homeland Security, and we're responsible for coordinating the federal government's role in preparing for, preventing, mitigating the effects of, responding to, and recovering from all domestic disasters. And that's whether it's natural or man-made, and that includes acts of terror. We are composed of about 44.1% minorities, 50.3% female, 11% disabled, and 14.9% veteran. All right, next slide. All right. All emergency and major disaster declarations are made solely at the discretion of the President of the United States, but that only occurs after a request has been submitted by the state or the region. Declarations authorized by the President provide supplemental federal disaster assistance. Types of disaster declarations are emergency declarations and major disaster declarations. Next slide, please. When it comes to response to a disaster, FEMA coordinates with federal operations and logistics to save and sustain lives, minimize suffering, and protect personal property and commercial property. Okay. When it comes to recovery, FEMA supports individuals and communities in their efforts to recover, provide individual assistance and public assistance. Public assistance is for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, as well as eligible nonprofit organizations. And something to also note, we have an agency within an agency, and it's called FEMA, the Federal Insurance Mitigation Agency. And they also come in after that recovery from a disaster and try to help you with cleanup, and also try to help prevent future disasters. Some people will also see them in coming into communities more often before a disaster ever strikes. Next slide. FEMA headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. That's where I work, and also Denise, and several employees work out of headquarters, even though they may be located at different areas throughout FEMA. At FEMA headquarters, we set policies, administer programs, develop procedures and guidance, and coordinate implementation with our regions and with the field elements. There are 10 regions and plus regional offices with joint field offices, otherwise known as JFOs, within FEMA. The regions implement, advocate, and provide feedback on national programs and policies. They work to improve capabilities of the state and tribal partnerships and maintain awareness of incidents and potential incidents. The regions are the primary face and voice of FEMA, with the disaster survivors and community partners. This staff is composed of reservists as well as regional and headquarters staff working as a team to service individuals in their communities. We're going to now discuss the FEMA position types. FEMA is composed of several different position types that support the agency as a whole. First, we're going to discuss our permanent and full-time. Our permanent full-time positions are what are considered competitive service jobs. This means that they are filled based on ability. The competitive process includes an application and an interview, maybe two, depending on those positions. After 1 year of continuous service, PFTs gain competitive status. After 3 years of continuous service, PFTs hired through that competitive process gain full career status. Next slide. All right, next we have our cadre on-call response and recovery employees, or otherwise known as core employees. Cadre on-call response and recovery employees, CORE, are hired to work a specific limited period between 2 to 4 years. These positions may be renewed if there's ongoing disaster work and funding is available. That ongoing disaster work, include anything from you're actually working a disaster at that time or working to support disaster efforts. Core employees are generally eligible for the same benefits as PFT employees, but do not gain competitive status nor career tenure during their term. Core employees can be hired under a streamlined process instead of a competitive process. Next slide. Okay. Next, we're going to discuss our local hiring positions. Reservists are divided into 23 different groups of personnel known as cadres that are organized by operational function. Each cadre is focused on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You use your skills and interests to determine what the best cadre may be for you. Then we have our on-call reservists. In these reserve positions, these reservists are considered on-call FEMA employees that travel during disaster and emergencies. They work on an intermittent basis due to the irregular nature of disasters. Reservists can be are part of the main FEMA workforce during an emergency or a disaster and can be hired also under a streamlined process instead of the competitive process. quite most often, these reservists may have a second job, just like military reservists do. And they've recently been granted protections if they go on a FEMA deployment, that they cannot be fired for being deployed. Next slide. These are our 23 different groups of personnel that fall into these different cadres, and they're organized by operational function. Each cadre is focused on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You are able to use your skills and interests to determine what the best cadre could be for you, whether that's a disaster emergency communications, you may fall under operations, or the Office of Chief Counsel. It just depends on your background, your specialties, your degrees. There's a lot of options within FEMA to explore. And as far as experience, you're going to gain, garnering experience is very important when looking into and applying for a position within FEMA. These are some of the opportunities that you can take to acquire government-related work experience to boost your resume. First, we're going to talk about the Student Volunteer Employment Program. It employs students to work at FEMA as unpaid volunteers for valuable experience directly related to their academic field of study. Students may receive educational credit for their internships. Next is going to be the Presidential Management Fellows Program. This is an advanced degree program for your master's, your doctorate, or professional degrees. Students that are about to graduate or recent graduates that have completed an advanced degree within the previous 2 years. The Pathways Internship Program is a paid opportunity for current students enrolled in high school through graduate school. Current students must be enrolled at least half-time in an accredited high school, college, professional, technical, vocational, or trade school. Looking at a degree equivalent to positions, you see that bachelor's degrees may qualify you for many GS5 level positions. Superior academic achievement, a high GPA may qualify you for a GS7 level position. A master's degree or law degree may automatically qualify you for many GS9 level positions, and a PhD or secondary law degree may automatically qualify you for a GS11 position. But then you also have experience gained through work. When describing work experience and how it can match your qualifications, there are a few things to consider. Use general and layman terms when describing your work experience. You need to highlight the results and the impact of your work and describe your quantifiable results with the task assignments you've completed. It's important that you list your certifications and training associated with the positions. A great resource for military personnel transitioning into the government workforce needing assistance with a resume is the Maryland Department of Labor Military to Federal Job Crosswalk website. And I'll post it again within the chat for you to be able to search after this meeting. Okay. Next. All right, here's a list of programs that you can use to also gain experience. You have the AmeriCorps, FEMA Corps, American Red Cross, and local and state disasters or emergency management agencies. FEMA Corps is an innovative partnership between FEMA and the AmeriCorps' National Civilian Community Corps, otherwise known as the NCCC program. FEMA Corps is a unique team-based service program that gives 18 to 24-year-old participants the opportunity to serve communities impacted by disaster while gaining professional development experience. FEMA Corps members live, work, and travel in dedicated teams, and they serve for 12 months with an option to extend for a second term. They gain training and experience while providing important support to disaster survivors and communities. They also earn a modest living stipend during their service and receive an educational credit award upon completion of the program. All right, and this is how to apply. You got to get getting your resume ready. When preparing your resume, remember that a federal resume is different than other resumes. When putting together your federal resume, you need to be very specific about your education, your training and or your experience, and demonstrate your accomplishments. Ensure that it covers specialized experience. It covers a specialized experience statement and focuses on the relevant experience for that job listing. Also remember that federal resumes are typically not going to be your one-page resume. The key is a lot of detail and making sure job descriptions are going to be in chronological order. Also include keywords that will help recruiters search your resumes. Listing certifications and trainings are also very important. Be sure to list all of your experience, all of your relevant experience. Okay, and now here are some of the competitive, non-competitive authorities that we use for hiring. There's Veterans Recruitment Authority, 30% or more disabled veterans, Peace Corps and Peace Corps federal staff, and AmeriCorps Vista, individuals with disabilities, Schedule A, and military spouses. Okay, and how to find positions. You can locate your permanent and full-time PFT, cadre on-call, response and recovery employee, or reservist FEMA positions on usajobs.com or careers@fema.com. Thank you for listening to this presentation. We're going to go back to our panel and give you guys an opportunity to hear from some of our employees that are military spouses or spouses of retirees that have had different aspects of FEMA and have experienced the federal spouse hiring experience. Thank you. Ooh, cancel. Okay. Give me just a moment. I'm going to post that link in the chat. Okay. I'm not sure how many people have just joined. Can I see a show of hands who just recently joined and hadn't heard from our panelists? Okay. All right, so it looks like we have one new person for the panel. Okay, you please send slide to email. Okay. Normally, okay, I see some questions here. Normally, the recruiter would be here. Only reason he is not here is because he got deployed at the last minute to do logistics in Puerto Rico. So that is the reason that Chip isn't here today. Let's see. Now I got a question. I know I asked this earlier. Have you guys submitted your resumes? Because Chip will see those resumes if you submit them. Let's see. Sorry, I'm getting plenty of invites going through here. Okay, great. And I'll have to ask for permission because that's not my slideshow. So I'll send an email to Chip and hopefully I can email it out. For someone that asked about the slideshow. Okay, I think we can start from the beginning again. Great. If people can put into the chat, because this will allow Chip to be able to look what type of positions that you're looking for. And he can try to match up for those of you that have submitted resumes or are going to. He could try to match you. He can possibly try to match you up with a job that you could be interested in. And in the meantime, for those that are new, I think we should go back to Tracy Johnston, military spouse engineering. Marilyn, I believe we have some things on the FEMA side of the house that you probably be interested in. I see you put down engineering, but have done some classes in emergency management. Glenise, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Don't they
we do have engineers in our section. I am not the engineers manager. And I think they recently had, okay, so I could speak to the reservists for our section. So we do have an engineering title. And if you can send us your resume, if you want to work as a reservist, which means it's intermittent, as an intermittent employee, you're on call here and there. You go out for a disaster. So I don't have any full-time engineer positions, but I do have, I'm sure that we do have within our reservist cadre.
Glenice, I know for that particular cadre, is it all right if they send an email straight to you? I'm going to put Chip's email address in the chat because he, again, like I said, he is the recruiter.
Yeah, and I'm going to put our disaster personnel email address in here as well. And you can send, if you want a reservist position, you can send your resumes to this email address. And then just put on the top of it which position you would like to be considered for. So there are several assistant reservist program managers, and each of them have a different title that they work with. So anything mitigation related, which means like engineers, insurance, floodplain management, grants, community planners, support specialists, management coordinators, data integration specialists. I'm trying to think of what else we have.
And this is just on the FEMA side of the house, right?
That's correct. That's within our cadre.
Okay.
I'm typing in the email address right now.
And I'm putting Chip's information in here. Let me see.
Yeah, and Chip does have a LinkedIn. I'm not sure what it is.
I think, let me see. I think it's on the bottom of one of his emails. Give me just a moment. And then, let's see. Chip.
All right, and we do have a question from Anka. Anka, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you right now.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm calling you from Dias. When I did my master's degree in human relations, I had an internship done. We were overseas at that time, and there were not a lot of internship availabilities, I guess. But I've done an online, I guess, internship with FEMA. There was a lot of a lot of online courses. It's been a few years. So how would that count if I would want to be working for you guys? How would that count towards my being qualified for a job?
Definitely put the work experience and the training in your resume. I mean, definitely put it in your resume. Those are things that's good to know because, I mean, you've worked with FEMA, you have an idea of what you may be interested in, correct?
Yeah, so it was an asynchronous training. It was just something I did on my own. I was not even in touch with any one of you guys. It was one of the courses that you had on your site.
Yeah, it's probably one of the EMI courses, and we do consider those. So, and it kind of like jumpstarts you into emergency management as well, because there are several courses that you take when you are hired into one of these, the 23 cadres. So your position title, so we open up a position title book that you work on and some of the classes that you take on our website. The website is open to everyone. The EMI website is open to everyone to take those classes. But like once you get hired, prior to that, please make sure that you do include it within your resume. And I also wanted to say, like, for each resume that you are, every job that you're applying for, make sure that your resume is specific to that job. So if you, and just like Shani was saying earlier, if you apply for one program analyst, maybe in logistics, it will not be the same program analyst position that you would have in hazard mitigation. So make sure that you look at what the job description is saying, especially the specialized experience, so that you can include all of that information within your resume when you do apply. So every time I apply for a job, it's a new resume. So the site only holds 5, but I keep a running tab, and I usually put like the name of the position and the date whenever I do a new resume, so that I'm able to keep up. Like I might be able to like just switch some words in there. switch some verbiage in there, you know, or include stuff. So for each job that you're applying for, you have to do a new resume, so that it's specific to that position that you're applying for.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much. Glenise and Shawnee. I'm saying
Yes,
that right?
Shawnee,
Okay.
yes.
Yes. If there's no one else waiting, I would like to ask you another question. Do you guys participate to fairs at other bases?
Say that one more time.
Would it be possible for you to participate in a fair, a job fair, at my base, for example? I'm the employment manager here, and I'm putting together, part of my job is to have a job fair for my spouses and members. And so FEMA was specifically asked by someone.
Oh,
So I'm actually going to email Chip.
yes,
Probably this person, right? Okay. Just like, I want to see what my prospects would be. Does your agency typically participate in such things?
I know that they do. They go to bases, because I've actually went to, when I came in through the agency, I was stationed on Quantico, and they came to Quantico, and I met with the reserve recruiter, the core recruiter, and the permanent recruiter, because they all had tables right there together, and it was pretty intense, that first meeting with them. And then they also did one at Fort Belvoir, and I saw them again, and they were like, "Oh, you've got to come to our," we were doing an annual event here, and they were like, you got to come. And that's how I ended up with FEMA. I almost didn't go to the job fair because I did not feel like it was my first week off after I was retiring, and I was like, I'm not going nowhere. But I had promised them I would show up, and here I am. You know, so, you know, when they're telling you you need to come in, for those of you that are listening, you need to come in, because that means that they know that there's something that they can probably fit you into.
Right.
And they came, they did stuff at Fort Belvoir, and I know they go around. I'm not sure, where are you located at again?
I'm in Abilene, Texas, at Dyess Air Force Base.
Now, isn't that Region 4, Glenise?
I think that's 5.
5? Okay.
No. Texas is 6.
Oh, yeah, that's the one. See, okay, I'm not gonna say it. I just remember I had problems with a travel claim after Harvey. So that's why I was like, yes, I remember that experience. But yeah. I'm sure Chip could help organize something for this.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great.
Too, because he wasn't there, but most recently, this summer, I was in Puerto Rico at one of their job fairs. So you know, sometimes it might not be specifically Shawnee or myself. It might be someone else in FEMA from one of the other departments, because they try to make sure that everyone is coming out. So sometimes it might be like somebody specific to HR or like one of the other cadres.
Okay, that's perfect then. If you can chime into the right person.
Yeah, and I can say for the Veterans Advisory Council, we've just added a recruiter, and those were those groups for those of you that were on earlier. But within FEMA, we have several what they call FERGs. They're organizations composed of FEMA employees, whether that's for the African American FERG, Hispanic FERG, Veterans FERG, Women's FERG, LGBTQ FERG. There's so many different groups where people go and they talk about FEMA issues, you know, things like that. And one of the things, because I'm part of the Veterans Council for FEMA, is that we were talking about, you know, recruitment, you know, and how trying to translate military experience over to this federal hiring thing can be very tricky for people. And so they wanted to get more, so they're looking to be more involved with the recruitment fairs. Yes, I put if you look in the chat for those that were asking about how to reach out to the recruiter, if you look up, that's Chip Lankert. I put his email address in there as well as his LinkedIn information.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay. All right.
I have a question.
There you go. All right. Yes.
So I think I'm in the process of applying for a position, but I want to ask you, you sound like you guys know your agency. So I have a background in mental health and case management, program management, 20 years, but I'm now getting my PhD in industrial organizational psychology. And so I have a lot of expertise in research, human resources, program management, and in trying to take those skills and put them with some of these job descriptions, or the descriptions are bad, it's the title of what job to apply for. Do you all, and I guess I'll give you this too, I have 10 years experience in the prison system. So I did work in EEOC. I have a lot of coordination experience, and, you know, so do you have any off the top of your head, any positions that you think would be fitting for someone with a background like me?
I know for me, off the top of my head, I was thinking EEO, like the Equal Employment Advisory or that type of
LER
region.
too. LER.
Yes, and that was that.
Yep.
Yep.
Wait, I have to
Yeah.
look. I have to look it up. Wait.
Yeah, but I think because I know like Glenise Jeremy came from the prison system, I believe, and he's doing training. He's a branch for training.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see who else. I'm trying to think that but that was an internal listing. They had an internal listing a couple months ago. They've created a new branch that they deal with like the FEMA values.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the requirements had something to do with like case management or something like that. Don't quote me. It was something in that arena because I had another employee at the time that her background in social services, and I remembered that her stuff applied directly to that, and she applied for that position. She ended up going with another job, but she did apply for that position.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And then probably some community outreach type positions. Wouldn't she probably fit in well over there, Glenise?
I can do that with my eyes closed.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was sitting here thinking, because I mean, dealing with the public when they're going through something, it takes like I'm that person, like you tell me you want me to go fix something or get something to you, no problem. But I know for me, it's hard for me to deal with other crying people because then I start crying and it's just not good for nobody. So, it's just not, so I like they were, I think Tracy and Glenise, one of you were talking about how they're doing the, what is it called where you guys are doing the claims for people?
Disaster survivor assistance.
Yeah.
Registration intake.
We just got stationed in New Orleans. So I just got here in July.
Oh, I was there for Hurricane Katrina in Irma. That's how I ended up.
So it sounds, everything you're talking about, I feel like I will have the opportunity down here at this new duty station.
So like another one, I'm looking at the cadres that we have. One is alternative dispute resolution, which is the one. That's the one. ADR will be good. Civil rights is another one.
That's part of my degree program. I'm in DE&I.
Yeah.
See, that would be, and they were looking for some people not that long ago. And if I were you, that's something, like I see for the Department of Education right now, there's a listing. I mean, it's not us, but there's a listing for a supervisory equal opportunity specialist.
Okay.
But that's out of here. But I mean, if you put in those, this gives you the code for that. Let me see. I'll just put that. It's not with us, but it gives you an idea of what kind of stuff to look for that field.
I'm cockeyed trying to look at all of these different.
It's okay. I'll at least put it in here because it sounds like you would be a good fit for that program. I would love to work in EEO. I just don't have that strong of a background, and I just did it while I was on active duty.
Yeah. I'm looking at, I just put in EEOC, and in New Orleans, they have a supervisory EO investigator. And it's for their field office.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. Let's see. That popped up because I had put in an international relations earlier. That was where that came from.
I just put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me see. Give me a second. And I see for that job, they have I'm gonna put it in the chat because there may be some other people interested, but I see some 100% remote positions for that too.
Neat.
You know, so those are, you know,
That's our kind of job.
yeah. Because what I did was I put in EO, equal opportunity, in the search, and then I put in New Orleans, and all of those came up under that search that I posted in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That gives me hope.
It's just learning how to maneuver and filter and just like you're saying, those keywords, or like what other position titles that I should look for. So if you have an idea of that. Did they speak about this morning about position descriptions? OPM might be able to assist you with this, but there are position descriptions. So like, I don't know if our numbers start with 300s, right? So there are position description for every federal job out there, and they all fall within a certain filing system. So like if you're looking for administrative jobs, they might all start with a series of 300. So like if you could look that up, you might be able to get titles for a position.
Let's see, contracting.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, because social sciences is 100, I think. Human resources is like 200, something like that.
Let's see.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we do have a couple more in the waiting room getting ready for the next session. So just wanted to let everyone know you are always more than welcome to stay, or if you want, you can join any of the other federal agency Zoom sessions. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and let some of the new guests in, and then get ready to start the presentations again.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, take your time. If you need Glenice and Shawnee, especially if you all need a quick break, we can wait about 3 minutes or so to let the other folks in.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to step away real quick. I'll be right back.
Hi, thank you for participating in the Federal Interagency Military Spouses Career Expo featuring 15 federal agencies. This session is being hosted by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. For this afternoon session, your microphone has been muted upon entry to the meeting. The meeting host will prompt you to activate your microphone to speak during the Q&A session. You are welcome to turn your video feed on or off. Please use the chat area to direct questions, comments, or remarks to the agency's representatives. All the afternoon sessions will be recorded, and the recording links will be emailed to all attendees in the days following today's event. PDF files of today's presentations will also be emailed as the federal agencies provide them. As we near the end of this session, we encourage you to leave this meeting and join any one of the other 15 meetings that are about to start. At that time, exit this meeting and click on the Zoom link for the next federal agency you wish to visit. If you prefer to stay in this meeting, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions or need assistance, click on this morning's general session Zoom link you used to join us, where help is standing by. And we will get started momentarily, but once again, thank you all for joining. All right, I see Shawnee, you're back. Glenice, do we have you? All right, we'll give it a few more minutes.
I was able to join on computer, so I'm on.
Great to have you back, Tracy.
Tracy, are you still deployed?
I am on rotation because my daughter's getting married on Saturday. I'll be back in Puerto Rico next week.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right, now I would like to welcome Shawnee Dallum and Glenice Allen of FEMA to provide you some opening remarks for this meeting session. Oh, Shawnee, you are muted.
Sorry about that. We also have Tracy Johnson. She's also on the line for our spouses. So let's get started. Welcome to the FEMA presentation, and I hope we can provide you more information about our organization, and hopefully in the future you consider us for employment. The FEMA mission is helping people before, during, and after disasters. Our current administrator is Deanne B. Criswell. She is over 21,200 plus employees, and we're a component under the Department of Homeland Security. We are responsible for coordinating the federal government's role in preparing for, preventing, and mitigating the effects of, responding to, and recovering from all domestic disasters, whether those are natural or man-made, and that includes acts of terror. We are composed of about 44.1 minorities, 50.3% female, 11% disabled, and 14.9% veterans. Next slide, please. When disaster strikes, many of you have probably heard of presidential disaster declarations. All emergency and major disaster declarations are made solely at the discretion of the President of the United States, but that only occurs after a request has been submitted by the state or the region. Declarations authorized by the President to provide supplemental federal disaster assistance. And those types of declarations are emergency declarations and major disaster declarations. When it comes to a response to a disaster, FEMA coordinates with federal operations and logistics to save lives, to save and sustain lives, minimize suffering, and protect property. And when it comes to recovery, FEMA supports individuals and communities in their efforts to recover, provide individual assistance and public assistance. Public assistance is for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, as well as eligible nonprofit organizations, otherwise known as NGOs. FEMA headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. At FEMA headquarters, we set policies, administer programs, develop procedures and guidance, and coordinate implementation within the regions and with field elements. When you review the map, you can see that we are composed of 10 different regions. These regions and regional offices, plus our joint JFOs, those are the joint field offices deployed throughout FEMA during disasters. The regions implements, advocates, and provides feedback on national programs and policies, improve capabilities of state and tribal partners, and maintain awareness of incidents and potential incidents. The regions are the primary face and voice of FEMA with disaster survivors and community partners. The staff includes reservists as well as the regional and headquarters staff working as a team to service individuals in the communities. Now we're going to discuss the different types of positions within FEMA. We have permanent full-time positions which are considered our competitive service jobs. This means that they are going to be based on ability. The competitive process includes an application and an interview. After 1 year of continuous service, PFTs gain what's called competitive status. After 3 years of continuous service, these PFTs, which are hired through the competitive process, gain full career status. Next, you have your cadre on call, response, and recovery employees, or core positions. Cadre on call, response, and recovery employees are hired to work a specific limited period between 2 to 4 years. These positions may be renewed if there's an ongoing disaster and funding is available. Your core employees are generally eligible for the same benefits as PFT employees, but do not gain competitive status nor career tenure during their terms. Core employees can be hired under a streamlined process instead of a competitive process. Then you come next to your local hires. Reservists are divided into 23 different groups of personnel known as cadres that are organized by operational function. You may be able to associate that with as your reservists in the military that are also they reflect the same jobs that are your active duty, but they're going to be spread throughout the United States, and they're divided up into groups of with either MOS or particular job fields. Each cadre is going to focus on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You use your skills and interests to determine what is the best cadre for you. Next, we have our reserve employee positions. Reservists are on-call FEMA employees that travel during disasters or emergencies. They work on an intermittent basis based on the irregular nature of disasters. Reservists are the main FEMA workforce during an emergency or disaster, and they can be hired under a streamlined process instead of a competitive process. And here you can see the reservists on-call cadres. They're divided into 23 different groups of personnel, and they are organized by operational function. Each cadre is focused on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You can use your skills and interests to determine what is the best cadre for you. There are a variety of positions within FEMA, which range from budget analysts and grants management to program analysts, public affairs specialists, and information technology specialists. Garnering experience is a very important thing when you're looking into and applying for a position with FEMA or any place within the federal government. Here are some of the opportunities to acquire some government-related work experience to help boost your resume. First, we're going to talk about the student volunteer employment opportunities. The student volunteer employment program employs students to work at FEMA as unpaid volunteers for valuable experience directly related to their academic field of study. Students may receive educational credit for their internships. The Presidential Management Fellows Program is for advanced degrees, whether it's your master's, doctorate, or other professional higher level degree of students that are about to graduate or recent graduates that have completed an advanced degree within the previous 2 years. The Pathways Internship Program has paid opportunities for current students enrolled in high school through graduate school. Current students must be enrolled at least half-time in an accredited high school, college, professional, technical, vocational, or trade school. Looking at a degree equivalency to positions, you can see that bachelor's degrees may qualify you for many GS5 level positions. Superior academic achievement, a high GPA may qualify you for a GS7 level position. Master's degree or law degrees may qualify you for many GS9 positions, and a PhD or secondary level law degree may automatically qualify you for many GS11 positions. When describing work experience and how it matches with job qualifications, you have to remember a few things. Use general and layman's terms when describing your work experience. Highlight the results and the impact of your work. Describe your quantifiable results with the task or the assignments that you've completed. List your certifications and training associated with the position. A great resource for military personnel transitioning into the government workforce needing assistance with a resume is to use the Maryland Department of Labor Military to Federal Job Crosswalk website. And after this, I will make sure I post it again in the chat. Here are a list of programs that you can also gain experience with. AmeriCorps, FEMA Corps, American Red Cross, and local disasters or emergency management agencies. FEMA Corps is an innovative partnership between FEMA and the AmeriCorps. It's National Civilian Community Corps, NCCC program. FEMA Corps is a unique team-based service program that gives 18 to 24-year-old participants the opportunity to serve communities impacted by disaster while gaining professional development experience. FEMA Corps members live, work, and travel in dedicated teams and serve for 12 months with an option to extend for a second term. They gain training and experience while providing important support to disaster survivors and communities. They also earn a modest living stipend during their service and receive an education award upon completion of the program. How to apply. When preparing your resume, remember that a federal resume is different than other resumes. When putting together your federal resume, you will need to be very specific about your education, your training, or your experience. You have to demonstrate your accomplishments and ensure it covers specialized experience statement and focuses on relevant experience. Also, remember that federal resumes are not one-page resumes. The key is a lot of detail and making sure job descriptions are in chronological order. Also, include keywords that will help recruiters search resumes. List your certifications and training are going to also be very important, and make sure you list your experience. These are some of our non-competitive hiring authorities. Your Veterans Recruitment Authority, your 30% or more disabled veteran authority, Peace Corps Federal Staff, AmeriCorps Vista, individuals with disabilities, or otherwise known as your Schedule A, and your military spouse preference. Okay, how to apply. Finding a position. This is something we all struggle with. If you can locate a permanent full-time PFT, cadre on-call response recovery employee, or reservist FEMA positions on USA Jobs or careers.fema.gov, apply. Another way is making sure that you submitted your resume. Here to Chip, we put his information in the chat and we'll make sure we put it again. He is the FEMA recruiter for this event. He just was unable to attend because he was deployed to Puerto Rico. So some of us are standing in on his behalf. So thank you for listening to our presentation. I'd like to transition to the panel discussion / Q&A and give you an opportunity to hear from current employees that represent the different facets of FEMA. Thank you. Okay, I want to go back to Tracy. Tracy, can you talk about your experience as a veteran spouse, military spouse, when you've dealt with hiring, and then also your experience here at FEMA?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tracy Johnston. My husband is not retired. He was a National Guard for 10 years and he became disabled in Desert Storm. So he's a 100% disabled veteran. I have his 10-point veteran status for the veterans preference. So they consider me 10-point other. As far as my experience with FEMA, I kind of got into FEMA a little bit different. I did not apply. I was recruited by I met the administrator for Region 3 and became a disaster assistance employee, which is now the reservist. I deployed for my first time. I was hired in 2008 and did not get deployed officially until 2011. So as they said with the reservist, it is intermittent. But now that the reservists are with the headquarters, you get deployed a lot more. For my example, my first deployment was out to Joplin, Tennessee, and I was there for 9 months. I was in New York for 50 weeks for Sandy, 6 months for New Jersey, and then I got onto the National IMAT Blue team, which is the IM Corps, or the core positions that Shawnee was talking about. I'm an IMAT Corps. for, which is Incident Management Assistance Team. So what we do is when we have a big hurricane like Ian and Fiona just came through, my team, there's 3 teams, red, white, and blue. And then there's a gold team that's based in Washington, DC. We go out, we stabilize the situation, we blend in with the state and the regions, and we stabilize the situations and then go on to the next disaster. There are 13 IMAT regionals teams, and there's, like I said, 4 national IMATs. My experience as a military spouse and disabled veteran spouse is, like she said, the core positions don't give you the preference. Full-time PFTs or permanent full-time positions are where you get your competitive status. It does help. It looks good for your resume. And if I can give you advice, is to make sure that you have all of your paperwork filled in and all of your documents up to par, because it helps a lot with recruitment. If you have any questions, just let me know.
All right, thank you. Now I want to go over to Glenise. She was a long time wife of a veteran. I think, was it 20, 30 years, Glenise? So she's been traveling around with her spouse for quite a long time before she ended up here at FEMA.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome, group number 3. Like Chani said, I am a military spouse of 30 years. He retired about 2 years ago, but we have been married. Next year will be 30 years. And so I started this journey in 1997, working with the federal government. And the first place that I did get spousal preference was when we PCS from Germany, from Heidelberg, Germany. So I have worked with several federal agencies, beginning with Department of Defense Dependent Schools, DODS. Also worked with DOD, both Army and Air Force. And so my last military spousal preference was with Department of Defense, working with the Air Force. And that was at JBLM in Washington State. So I moved from Washington State here to FEMA, currently in Washington, DC. My spouse continued traveling for his military career during that time and has now retired. But the military spousal preference has worked really well for me throughout my 20-something years of the federal government. I was able to use it at 2 or 3 different times. So I encourage you to utilize that whenever you can. I am currently a cadre management team lead at FEMA, where I work with the reservist program specifically within hazard mitigation. And I also worked with IM Corps. So I am not only the team lead, but also a supervisor of record for several position types within our cadre. So one of 23 cadres, we have maybe 20-something titles that we don't necessarily need, but we utilize over 20-something titles within our cadre of mitigation. So our cadre is resilience. Unlike Tracy, where she's boots on the ground, we come at the end and we're going to teach you how to mitigate anything that happened at the current time and anything for the future. So we're making sure that this never happens again when my team comes in. I have also worked as a disaster survivor assistant, where I do registration intake. I did that during Hurricane Irma and Maria. What is that, maybe 5 years ago? And I was able to go home to the Virgin Islands, and that's where I learned a little bit more about FEMA and felt like, oh yeah, this is interesting. I want to deploy. I want to be out there. I want to be boots on the ground. But since then, I have not deployed In person, I deploy from my resident of record, and I still do registration intake in the evening. So right now, like Tracy mentioned, we have 2 disasters, but it's actually 3 because there was a disaster in Alaska. So we have Hurricane Fiona and Hurricane Ian that we're doing registration intake for currently. And there are several others, I'm sure, that's going on, but that's where we get the most calls from. So I look forward to your questions. Please make sure that you have questions for us. We're here to assist. Thank you.
Now, I just have to say from earlier, and like I said, correct me if you're wrong. If I'm wrong, you started off as a GS4 in the federal government, and now you're at a supervisory 13.
That's correct. I started off as a GS4, and when I left my DoD federal GS job, I was an IC 11, so a core 11 when I came to FEMA. So I know that like our positions are totally different from the GS permanent full-time positions. So you can move around. There's possibilities for you. There is promotion for you here at FEMA. Whereas, you know, as a permanent full-time employee, as a GS employee, you might not get like with some of the other agencies. And we have the same benefits that they do. We're just on a term position, and our positions last because I mean, we still work in Hurricane Sandy. So, and how long ago was that? So, you know, we're funded through Robert T. Stafford Emergency Relief Fund. So our positions continue. So you get renewed, you know, or if you don't get renewed, you will be probably and possibly in another position at that time. So there are several opportunities within FEMA.
And I'm glad you said some of that, because it reminded me of the other thing I wanted to talk about is that you may hear about disasters in the news and you're like, oh, it's over with. It's not. You know, we have disasters literally open for years. I was a young staff sergeant in New Orleans when Katrina hit. And I think Katrina just got, and wasn't like 2 years ago was closed out? Something like that? Or do they still have a couple open?
I think that it's closed out because like right now, we traveled to Louisiana this past
Was
summer.
it for that line of
And
accounting?
they're still working on some grant stuff there.
Yeah.
So
And that's what I'm talking about. So like these disasters, how she said that you have, and the best way I can put it is you have the FEMA side of the house where, you know, your logistics, operations, supply chain, all these people are involved at that beginning. Then you have the FEMA side of the house, which is your insurance and mitigation efforts to, you know, to improve the area, to try to help prevent some of those disasters or lower your risk. They're going to be there for years. You know, it's like, so these things are long and ongoing, but that doesn't mean you're going to be deployed for years. It just means that you may deploy at any given time, or you may not deploy at all. You'll be working from an office, or if you're working in a remote position at home, working on those assignments to try to help continue to improve those communities. I was dual military, and when I retired, my husband ditched and got out first. So, you know, there's still some hard feelings there, but it is what it is. So I had a little bit more time when I did my transition. And I kind of think I always knew I wanted to work with FEMA because I was in Hurricane Katrina. I was the emergency management officer when I was stationed there. And I think we had evacuated maybe 4 or 5 times by the time Katrina hit. And then it really changed my outlook on a lot of things, whether it was just stuff to what I might want to do when I retire. So when I started looking at organizations, I was telling another call earlier, I was seeing all these different agencies, looking at the federal government, and I was like, these people here look miserable, but these people over here at FEMA, they look happy to be here. And so the more I got to, you know, going to job fairs, talking to people, most of us are pretty happy to be here because we enjoy we enjoy helping people. Alyssa, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, I didn't know if it was okay to ask a question. You guys were kind of ripping. It was interesting to hear. Okay, cool. Well, I'm an environmental scientist, and my research is really focused on climate resilient communities. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering, I've kind of looked into FEMA before. My husband and I are both very, I guess, service oriented, response oriented people. And so I was wondering if you could speak to any positions that were maybe related to climate resilience or even GIS systems, geospatial kind of stuff.
I'm just excited. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Super excited.
Yes.
Tony, that's where you work, isn't it?
Yes, and that's why I was like, oh, really? Like, it's really. I am actually I'm actually dealing with contracts in the. When you said this, that's why I just started laughing. Not because it's just my office deals directly. Well, my department started off with about 12 to 15 people, and they're now. I don't know. We're probably about to be 100 plus at some point here that deals directly with the things you're talking about. I work for the Office of Environmental and Planning and Historic Preservation over on the FEMA side of the house, the FEMA Federal Insurance Mitigation Agency. And we, like I was telling people earlier, I didn't even know what a FEMA was. I knew what FEMA was, but I didn't know what FEMA was. And it's an agency within the agency that focuses on, your grants, your planning, a lot of the things that you would be very interested in. And they also have a reserve cadre, if I'm not wrong. That's right, Glenise, right? Because I know they have cadre over there. I've only been with this side of the house for a little bit of time. I was originally in IMRD. And then from there, I came from the logistics side in the FEMA side of the house. So I've jumped around enough to know where I know a lot about one side, a little bit about another, and I'm just learning more about them. But there's a lot of jobs that are going to be coming out over the next couple months. So you're just going to have to watch USA Jobs for those. But most of the people that I've talked to over here, they started out as reservists, and then they moved up to core employees, and then they found their way to headquarters. What area are you located in? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that, Alyssa. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. It was telling me I couldn't talk anymore. Yeah, my husband is stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas. So we are about 2 hours from Kansas City, Missouri. Topeka is like an hour away. So we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. I was hoping for a more remote position, but obviously FEMA is more boots on the ground. But yeah,
it depends. It very much depends. It depends on what you're doing within the organization. Like some jobs, yes, they're going to want you there 3-4 times a week. Other jobs are like, as long as you're doing your work from home, I don't need to see you. That's, other jobs you may have with FEMA are like, hey, you're only going to see when you're deploying or you're coming to training. It really depends on on what you're looking for from the organization and that particular job listing. And they'll say like, it offers telework or it's 100% remote, and like that telework policy is something to ask when you go through, if you push your resume through and it gets accepted, ask those people on ask the panel, is this something that's, has the option to come in, do I need to come in once or twice a pay period, or is this something that can be remote, or is this something that I'm only expected to deploy for? Because they have different requirements for different pins. Like if you're working for headquarters, even though you may have the same job title, working for headquarters versus working for the region are going to have different operational requirements. And that's something that you have to take into account when you're working with FEMA. And like I tell people all the time, take a job, you may come into the agency just to get into the agency, but that gives you a chance to, see if this is where you want to be. And then it also gives you a chance to see, it's like, what, that I really wanted a job over here in this part of the agency. And that part of the agency may not be 100% remote work, but I really want to do this work. So sometimes you have to just balance it out. But we have a lot of telework and remote work options. We were doing telework and remote work before when I joined the agency back in when did I retire? I lose track of time. 2015. First thing when I came in, they were like, what are going to be your days that you work from home? And I didn't even know how to deal with that because I was like, people do that. I didn't even know, I was like, people, and they were like, yeah, you work from home twice a week. And that was the norm for me. And even before COVID, at least 2 of the people that I worked with were 100% remote. And that was in the logistics side of the house, but that's not that common at all, but over here, it's a little bit different. It really just depends on what you're working, what your assignments are, and what the requirements are from the agency. But it's a lot of options within FEMA as far as work-life balance. And they're very big on work-life balance here too.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And it's also kind of good to know for employment purposes, bad for disaster relief, I guess, that these positions can last several years, because it can be scary when you look and you see temporary listed. And, for someone like me, I'm sure a lot of us feel the same way. We're looking for longevity in our careers. And so it's nice to kind of hear that these temporary positions aren't really so temporary.
People retire off of these positions. They just get their contracts renewed and renewed. I was telling another group earlier, I interviewed for a permanent position. I didn't get that position, but because they wanted me and that they needed my skill set, they created a core position, which was a 2-year position. I came on board. And then when that permanent position came open, I moved into that PFT like 6 months after I had been here. But in that 6 months I had been here, I think I was in Flint for I came in after Thanksgiving. I went to my orientation. I was in Flint in January, and my boss every 2 weeks, because again, I came from the military. It was my first government job. Every 2 weeks, he would call me and be like, "Oh, how you doing, Shawnee?" Yeah, I'm like, "I'm great. We're doing this work." He's like, "Oh, when you think you're coming home?" I'm like, "I don't know." This went on for about 3 months till he finally said, "You can come home, right?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." People do that because why? I had been in the military. When I got orders, I went where I was until they told me I was going to come back. Here, I think it's 30 days, Glenise, and then they can give you the option to go home.
Yep.
Yeah, and you don't have to stay. It isn't like, oh, you have the option to come home and come back. No, you could say, "Thank you for your time, but I'm not staying here." It just it depends on what you're doing. They may offer you another set of orders. Like during Harvey, I went from Dallas, Fort Worth, where I was helping what they call the DCs, the distribution centers. I was helping them to get all the cargo generators and stuff to the flooded areas and rerouting trucks and stuff like that. They sent me down to San Antonio and they were like, "Hey, we need you to set up a staging yard to receive all these empty trucks." So I went down there and did that. And they said, "Oh, we need to send you to an airfield." So I went to a military airfield and was welcoming cargo coming from other nations, donated gear. Came back to DC. I was here for a couple of weeks before I went to Charleston. And from there, I was sending gear over to Puerto Rico. But in that time, I was just bouncing all over the place. But every time it was like, "Do you want to go?" Now that was me as a corps. As a reservist, they'll send, they have what they call DTS. They'll send you those things through there. I was just like, they asked me first, but like DTS, they'll send it to you and you have a choice to accept or decline. There's rules that come along with how many times you can decline as a reservist before they get you pushed out the system. And I know Glenise can probably talk better to that than I can, just because she deals with the cadres and she has several that are under her as a supervisor for a cadre. But I like deploying. Honestly, I really do like deploying because I get to see, it's different when you're sitting in an office or sitting at home and people are telling you what's there. I don't know how many times I said, "Just FaceTime me so I can see what you're talking about," because I hear you, but I don't understand. And even then it's hard, when they're trying to show me the damage or trying to show me the flooded area if I haven't been there. Because when you go there and you talk to these people and you learn their traditions and their history, what's just a street to us can have generations of families that have lived in that area. And they may have moved there because of segregation, but they don't want to leave because these are the homes they own. This is the land that great grandma was born in these homes. I ran into that a lot when I was talking to people in New Orleans. These homes to them are more than a home. These areas are more than an area. It's simple for some of us to say just move, but FEMA takes into account all of that, and they're making efforts to try to help, whether it's the wealthiest community to the most disenfranchised community, be able to survive and be able to thrive despite what disasters come. And that, to me personally, is important. The people are important, but also their culture and their history is important. I don't know if I went on a rant, but
No, that was great.
Okay.
I love hearing that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Glenise, can you tell them more about the cadres?
Sure, I can. So our cadre, a cadre is made up of reservists and IM corps. Well, our IM corps that we have, we call them direct charge corps. And they are all deployable assets, meaning that if anything happens or if we need them to go anywhere, they could go out. I work within hazard mitigation, and outside of the 23 cadres that FEMA have, our cadre has over 20 titles. They range from branch director to grants management to management coordinators to floodplain management, insurance specialists, support specialists, data integration specialists. Did I say grants? And I think, community educators. So we have several different titles within our cadre, and the titles, you could progress from a specialist all the way up to group supervisors within any of those titles. So like Shawnee spoke of, as a reservist, you can only deploy for up to 50 weeks. If you deploy outside of 50 weeks, wherever you're deployed to becomes your home of record. So that's why they're only allowed to deploy for 50 weeks, but you could come back home at any time during your deployment and you'll just be deployed on rotation. So we have several people, and the reservists make a determination because they're intermittent. So they determine like how long they want to be out there. And when they do get deployed, even though I'm the supervisor of record, they also receive a temporary duty supervisor. So somebody that's boots on the ground with them that they can have all these discussions with. So that's one thing. It was something else that I wanted to speak about with reservists. The declinations. You can only have 3 declinations. And after the 3rd declination, we can fire you because of the declinations, for lack of a better word. So there are different types of leave that you can take if you're not deployed. You can also go on something that we call PANA, where you get probably 90 something hours every year. They don't roll over. So you can be on PANA during these times whenever there's a disaster or whenever. So it's you making yourself unavailable so that the system doesn't deploy you. You get deployed according to an algorithm, unless it is something like we have going on right now. We have 2 major hurricanes that hit, Ian and Fiona. So what I've been doing is I communicate with my staff and I find out who wants to go. So I might call you today and say you have to be ready within 24 hours. Tracy's gone. I was going to say Tracy could speak to this, that she goes like real quick, but my staff gets a little bit more time to prepare. So as a reservist, that at any time, that you might receive a DTS message to get deployed in person, and you have to be there within a 24-hour time period. So I hope I spoke enough about reservists and what they do.
Yeah, and I can tell you from that activation standpoint, when I was always, it's like my daughter has second sense. I'm telling you, I would get dropping her off at daycare and she's like, "You're going to leave me." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm just going to the office. I get in there. It's like, everything's fine. I go to a 9 o'clock meeting to 9, 10 o'clock. I leave the meeting and by noon I'm rushing home to get my suitcase so I can go catch a plane, and yeah, it can be like that. Sometimes you might have a couple of days notice. Sometimes you may literally have hours, but once you get those DTS orders, you're on the move. Unless there's a reason like you can't leave. Like when I first joined, I couldn't leave because one, it was a snowstorm. It was so bad we couldn't even get to the airport. And then the other part, I had been here such a short amount of time. They had to FedEx me my credit card. So I ended up sitting here for I thought I was leaving because they tell you in the beginning you're going to leave within hours. It took me a couple of days before I actually left for Flint. You know, other times I was sitting in there and they're like, can you go to Hawaii? I'm like, when? They were like, today? I'm like, okay, you know, just it's like that. You know, I've been to Hawaii probably 4 times since I've been with the organization. So, yeah.
Any other questions? This is a quiet group.
Yeah.
What type of experience are you looking for as far as just getting hired on and best way to get in and get your foot in the door with FEMA? Anything particular?
I have to say that like the good thing about FEMA is the job experience is so broad. I mean, they've had jobs in here I didn't even know that they had, to be honest with you. You know, it can be anything from, you know, your regular accounting to like a contracting officer representative to like your generic. When I say generic, and I say this because if you look online, they'll say an emergency management specialist, but every emergency management specialist qualifications on the job description are not the same. You know, same with your program and management analyst. They're not going to always be the same. There may be some fields that are similar, but others are going to be different. It just depends. But there are so many jobs, like whether it's from public affairs, you got a whole floor, I think, or at least half a floor that's dedicated to nothing but legal. You know, you got, what is it? I think admin takes, do they still take up a whole floor, Glenise?
Who's that?
Admin, the administrators.
Oh yeah, they're on the 8th floor, and legal is in one corner of the 8th floor.
That's what it is. Yeah, like one's on one side and one's on another.
Yeah. And external affairs take up a whole other section on that floor.
Is there any remote, or is it mostly, where's the headquarters? Where I'm in Dallas, so just wondering what FEMA opportunities are like here.
In Dallas itself, I know in Dallas Fort Worth is the distribution center there. So if you deal with like the logistics, supply chain management side of the house, I know that stuff is there. And I only know that because I've been there a couple times, and that was what I was dealing with when I was there. I don't know about like for mitigation and things like that, but they have, isn't that where isn't regional headquarters in that area?
Yeah, Region 6. I think that they're in Austin.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I knew it was somewhere around there because people were driving.
I think that they might be in Austin.
I know we're a huge hub for like the insurance component, you know, just the insurance adjusting and all of that is pretty much heavily based here in Dallas. So
yeah, it's also a personnel mobilization center. So anytime anyone is going to say possibly like the Virgin Islands or anything like in the southern part of the United States, they go through the PMC in Texas.
Yeah.
Where was it? Something Redvine?
Yeah, I can't remember. I just remember like
Grapevine, probably. That's here. I figured, I know we're like a huge hub just with like our central location and access to DFW airport. And I know I have a lot of friends that are on the insurance side and that have moved here to this area specifically so that they're kind of central to all of the, you know, disasters.
Some community planners there, some grants folks that are there. So like within mitigation, if you're doing like any of my reservist type positions, you can qualify by just having a master's degree in any field. You know, so as soon as HR, and I don't think we have any positions being advertised right now. The last one that we have was insurance. We had floodplain before that. My positions I did in March. I think that they were sent out in March. And I pretty much, because we have a certain number that we're supposed to have within our cadre, and I hired like everyone that I needed to off of those certs, off of the job certs. So our HR personnel that we have, once you have a master's degree, your name will come on the certificates to us for a reservist position. Specifically for a reservist position. Yeah. And those are just they're intermittent, just on-call positions. So some positions, because of COVID, some positions got called out more than others. But we have all these new disasters that, you know, things are going to totally change. And before they were doing remote work, whereas now all the reservists have to deploy. You have to deploy in person, or else that you would have to decline the deployment and then we would have to get rid of you because you can't have any more than 3 declinations. Yeah.
Now, are there positions that like work remotely until it's time to go on a deployment? That's more of like a long-term that does more support work that's behind the scenes and then goes out to disasters, or what would I be looking for?
I had a special project, and that's the other thing that we looked at. We looked at a lot of special projects because our reservists were not being able to go out in person because of the types of jobs that they did. So I am closing down my special project that they've been doing this one since January. And I had 23 people deployed to it. It was the Building Resilience, Infrastructure, and Communities BRIC. And that's becoming a big thing too. So all of the regions will be hiring their own planners, their own grant specialists. So they'll have community planners and grant specialists that they'll be hiring within all these 10 regions. They have 2 positions each. So like for that, everybody that worked on it for me, they worked from home.
Okay.
You know, we're turning it over to the region, so the region is going to hire their own staff. So that's the other thing that you can look for. Like anytime there's a disaster or anything close to your area, that they look for local hires. So that's one of the other position types that we hire for is local hire.
Thank you.
Now, I'll also say how she was talking about, like some of them you can, with a master's degree, they're going to automatically get on. Some of these jobs are solely based on experience. You know, it's like having your degree is great to have, but it's not going to always be degree based. And I know you guys can see that from when you look on USA Jobs. They may say the experience, qualification, and a degree. Some may say, you know, just experience. Some may say a degree. It just depends on the job, you know, so.
Yeah, and see, like one of our major titles that we have is a community educator. And these are the people that go out. They're like boots on the ground. You'll find these people like at Lowe's, Home Depot, any mom and pop shop, and they'll be like providing pamphlets to let people know like what we offer. So as a community educator, we could train you to do that.
Yeah.
So that's why I said like for my positions, you know, once you have that degree, you know, we're like, we could train them.
Yes, they can do anything.
You know, and I mean, I look forward to giving people opportunities because I know like where I came from as a military spouse.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now in my career.
How hard it was. And I started the federal system a long time ago. So I mean, I worked at a school as a special education aide, you know. So and every time we went somewhere, it was like us starting all over. Where the military has their community, we have to start, you know. So I like to educate, you know, folks. So your resume might come back several times, and it's just for me to help you to see how to like actually write this resume, so that you don't only utilize it here within FEMA, but you can use it anywhere that you do that.
Super helpful.
Yeah, and I can say like when I retired at 21 years from the military. I had all this logistics and transportation, operational experience. I had all this experience. I had some college. I hadn't finished college. I came here, finished college while I was here, you know, so, but they hired me based solely on my experience.
Right.
You know, and so it's really a balance, you know. Then my next position with FEMA had to have my experience and my degree. It just, you know, then my next position, all they cared about was my experience and whether I was a contracting officer representative that actually understood.
Like as long as I checked the boxes.
I think they would have been like, look, you got your GED and understand these contracts and can get this training.
Let's go.
Yeah, you know, you know, and that's like, so when you guys also see these jobs in there where they're listing like, you know, it might say GS, you know, 9, 11, 12, and it's like for contracting officer representative or a contracting specialist, and it's a training program. Don't just automatically push those to the side. I know several people that went through those type of programs, and within 5 years they went from a 9 to a 13. You know, because they were moving up the ladder using those programs, and they were gaining the experience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also something to have in your pocket. Like I went through core training. I haven't finished it, but as like, you know, like if I do apply for a job, I could possibly do some core type work, you know. So it's like just having all these different things in your pocket. So before I was only being hired because of my experience. Because of my experience, I went to school. I finished my master's. I almost finished my PhD, and I couldn't get a job. You know, so I'm like, okay, because my experience, I had my experience prior to me having my degree. They only looked at my experience. So you know, it's like just put everything in there.
Yeah. I'm like, how far back
time.
do you want me to go? Like, I guarantee if you need me to do it, I can do it. But how deep do you want to get here?
Yeah. And I can tell you too, just from being on the interviewing panel side of the house, because I've been at all the different steps since I've been here long enough, from where there is helping list the job, create the job, to that final hiring. I have sat there with 2 candidates on this hiring panel that we were going back and forth with for 3 hours. Like we gave up, came back to the table, and we eventually chose one candidate based off of some experience he wrote down. And when we saw that he had that, we were like, you know what, that region needs that. The other candidate, because like they both scored the same, because we go off of scoring when we're doing these interviews. They both scored the same, but we couldn't find, it was becoming very, like, you know, we were like, look, we don't want to base people off just, I think I like him better, or I like her better. No, what do we have? And when it came down to those 2 lines, that's what got that person the job. So it's important to put your experience in, because you never know. Sometimes it's frustrating. People will list these jobs, and then you go in the interview and you're like, this job doesn't sound nothing like the job listing that I applied for. Because I know, because I just looked at it for this interview. But that's because sometimes they're like, I know you have this, but do you have these things? Is what I've discovered over time of being with FEMA.
Now, for federal hiring, is it good to like go really far back? I mean, because I know for, you know, corporate America, it's like I list my last 3 positions, but I mean, I've got 20 years of great experience just with a large gap because of kids, and we lived rurally at our last duty station. So
I would say everything that can pertain to that job listing, that's what you need to put in there. Like I have a resume that's over 15 pages, but what I do is I pull out the stuff that qualifies, that goes to that position, and then I'll edit my resume. Whereas I might have wrote something one way, but then I realized that some of that job experience that they're looking for, that's a requirement. I'm like, oh, this can apply to that. I just need to reword it and add it. You know, so I mean, don't just think once you finish your resume, you're all done. I learned the hard way. You need to dump that resume.
That's a job. That's a job in itself.
Yes.
I know. And I'm like, oh gosh, I forgot I did that. You know, that was 15, 20 years ago. And like, that would have totally been relevant, but it's just, you know, time goes.
Okay. And then, let's see, Sarah, I see you were saying that you're uneducated other than disaster.
So we have a couple that may have joined after who didn't get to see the presentation, if we wanted to just kind of quickly run through those again.
Okay.
Sure.
Sarah, what did she say?
Yeah, I think Sarah just recently joined, so that's why she wanted me to do the presentation again. And then we can hit her question up. But just as a quick answer, yes, there's a lot of jobs that are not directly related to emergency response, but are indirectly. Everybody with us in FEMA is considered an emergency responder, period. You know, but just if you're doing HR and all you're doing with payroll, are you know, no, you know, but you may have a secondary position that you do that may involve direct support. So you have your direct and your indirect support, and we could talk about that as well as the different type of jobs within FEMA. All right, I guess we can do the presentation one more time.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Welcome to the presentation on the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We are a department located under the Department of Homeland Security. We deal with emergency management, and our mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is a component under the Department of Homeland Security. Our current administrator is Deanne B. Criswell. FEMA is responsible for coordinating the federal government's role in preparing for, preventing, mitigating the effects of, responding to, and recovering from all domestic disasters, whether those disasters are natural or man-made, and that includes acts of terror. Currently, we have 21,200 plus employees with 44.1% minorities, 50.3% female, 11% disabled, and 14.9% veterans. I don't know if that's there. Okay. All emergency and major disaster declarations are made solely at the discretion of the President of the United States, but this only occurs after a formal request has been submitted on the part of the state or the region affected by the disaster. Declarations authorized by the President to provide supplemental federal disaster aid are disasters of two types: emergency declarations and major disaster declarations. When it comes to response to a disaster, FEMA coordinates with federal operations and logistics to save and sustain lives, minimize suffering, and protect property. And then when it comes to recovery, FEMA supports individuals and communities in their efforts to recover, provide individual assistance and public assistance. Public assistance is for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, as well as eligible nonprofit organizations, otherwise known as NGOs. FEMA headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. At FEMA headquarters, we set policies, administer programs, develop procedures and guidance, and coordinate implementation with regions and field elements. If you can observe our map is, shows that we have the United States and its territories spread out between 10 regional offices plus our joint field offices, also known as JFOs within FEMA. The regions implement, advocate, and provide feedback on national programs and policies. We improve the capabilities of the state and tribal partners, and maintain awareness of incidents and potential incidents. The regions are the primary face and voice of FEMA, with disaster survivors and our community partners. Our staff includes reservists as well as regional and headquarters staff working as a team to serve individuals in their communities. Next, we're going to discuss position types within FEMA. First, we have our permanent full-time positions. These are competitive service jobs. This means they are filled based on ability. The competitive process includes an application and an interview. After 1 year of continuous service, PFTs gain competitive status. After 3 years of continuous service, PFTs are hired through the competitive process, gain full career status. Next, we have our cadre on-call response and recovery employees, otherwise known as core positions. Our cores are hired to work for a specific limited period within 2 to 4 years. These positions may be renewed if there's ongoing disaster work and funding is available. Core employees are generally eligible for the same benefits as PFT employees, but they do not gain competitive status nor career tenure during their term. Core employees can be hired under a streamlined process instead of a competitive process. Next, we have our local hires. Reservists are divided into 23 different groups of personnel known as cadres that are organized by operational function. And our local hires are there to provide disaster and response efforts within that community. And so those residents can apply for jobs within the organization. And each cadre is focused on a different aspect of FEMA. You must use your skill and your interest to decide what's going to be the best cadre for you. Lastly, we have our reservists, our on-call positions. Reservists are on-call FEMA employees that travel during disaster emergencies. They work on an intermittent basis due to the irregular nature of disasters. Reservists are the main FEMA workforce during an emergency or disaster and can be hired under a streamlined process instead of a competitive process. Now, I just have to note that any of our positions can be deployed. Our reservists are our first line of defense, or are often going to be the first called upon to deploy. Reservists are divided into 23 different groups of personnel known as cadres that are organized by operational function. Each cadre is focused on a different aspect of the FEMA mission. You use your skills and interests to determine what's going to be the best cadre for you. As you see, there is a lot of there are so many different places that you can possibly find a home at within our organization. Then you look at the position variety. It's like you saw the cadres, but now you can look at like some of the job titles. These are just a few of, I think, probably a couple hundred different job types that are within our organization. And these positions can range for anything from a budget analyst and grants management specialist to a program analyst, a supervisory public affairs specialist, or even an information technology specialist. It just really depends on what you're looking for. Garnering experience is very important when you're looking to and applying for positions at FEMA or any place within the federal government. Here are some opportunities to acquire some government-related work experience to boost your resumes. The Student Volunteer Employment Program employs students to work at FEMA as volunteers. These are unpaid positions for valuable work experience directly related to their academic field of study. Students may receive educational credit for their internships. The Presidential Management Fellows Program is for advanced degree holders, such as your masterate, doctorate, or professional degrees of students that are about to graduate, or they may be recent graduates that have completed an advanced degree within the previous 2 years. The Pathways Internship Program has paid opportunities for current students that are enrolled in high school through graduate school. Current students must be enrolled at least half-time in an accredited high school, college, professional, technical, vocational, or trade school. To qualify through secondary education, looking at degree equivalents to positions, you can see that bachelor's degrees may qualify you for many GS5 level positions. Superior academic achievement, that's a high GPA, may qualify you for a GS7 level position, and master's degrees or law degrees may qualify you automatically for many GS9 level positions, and a PhD or secondary level law degree may automatically qualify you for many GS11 positions. Then you have your experience gained through work. When describing work experience and how it matches job qualifications, there are a few things to consider. Use general or layman's terms when describing your work experience. Highlight the results and the impact of your work. Describe your quantifiable results with the task or assignments that you've completed, and list certifications and trainings that are associated with that position. A great resource for military personnel transitioning through the government workforce that need assistance with your resume is the Maryland Department of Labor's Military to Federal Job Crosswalk website. And I'll make sure I post that in the chat at the end of this presentation. Community involvement. There are a list of programs that you can use to gain experience. AmeriCorps, FEMA Corps, American Red Cross, and your local and state disasters or emergency management agencies are a great place to get into the get experience that can push you towards the emergency management field. FEMA Corps is an innovative partnership between FEMA and the AmeriCorps National Civilian Community Corps, NCCC program. FEMA Corps is a unique team-based service program that gives 18 to 24-year-old participants the opportunity to serve in communities impacted by a disaster while gaining professional development experience. FEMA Corps members live, work, and travel in dedicated teams and serve for 12 months with an option to extend for a second term. They gain training and experience while providing important support to disaster survivors and communities. They also earn a modest living stipend during their service and receive an education award upon completion of their program. When preparing your resume, remember that a federal resume is different from other resumes. When putting together your federal resume, you need to be very specific about your education, your training, or your experience. You need to demonstrate your accomplishments and ensure that it covers specialized experience statements and focus on relevant experience. Also remember that federal resumes are not typically going to be a one-page resume. The key is a lot of detail and making sure job descriptions are in chronological order. Also include keywords that help recruiters search resumes. Listing certifications and training are also very important. Make sure to list all your experience. Here are some of our non-competitive hiring authorities. You have your Veterans Recruitment Authority, your 30% or more disabled veterans authority, Peace Corps and Peace Corps federal staff / AmeriCorps Vista, individuals with disabilities, otherwise known as their Schedule A, and your military spouses. Now, these are ways to find a position. You can go and search for USA Jobs, and here you can locate your PFTs, your permanent full-time, your cadre on-call response and recovery employees, or some of our reservist FEMA positions. And you can find that on USA Jobs or at FEMA.gov/careers. Thank you for listening to our presentation. I'd now like to transition back to our panel and our question and answer session and give you an opportunity to hear from current employees that represent different facets of FEMA and to take your questions. Thank you. Okay. Okay, and just to let you guys know, I am not the recruiter for FEMA. The recruiter was deployed. I think this is the first deployment after being with the organization for so long. He's deployed to Puerto Rico, so I'm standing in for him today. I've put his information in the chat, but I'll put it in again for those of you who are new who just joined here recently. I also put in that link for the Maryland Federal Crosswalk website. Glenise, can you go ahead and talk while I do that and tell them about your experience as a military spouse, your career, and about FEMA?
Okay. Hello, folks. Welcome. So my military career started almost 30 years ago. My first employment was in Heidelberg, Germany in 1997. And when we PCS back from Germany, I did receive priority placement for another position. So I have worked with several federal agencies. I started with Department of Defense Dependent Schools, that's DODS, that was in Germany. And then when I came over, I worked for Department of Defense. I worked both for the Air Force and for the Army. And during the time that I was working for the Air Force, so I got those two positions that I had were priority placement positions that I received the priority placement for. One was in Georgia, and then the other one was in Washington State. It was when I worked for the Air Force in Washington State when 5 years ago, it had several major hurricanes. Irma, Maria, I'm sure that you guys heard about them. And Hurricane Harvey was going on at the same time, and they needed assistance from other government agencies. So I was able to deploy as a disaster survivor assistant with FEMA. And I was able to do that because I worked for the federal government. And instead of them hiring local hires or hiring folks off the street, it was easier to utilize other government agencies because we came with a credit card, we were able to travel, we already had our clearance, so we were good to go. So, after working with FEMA, even though I had worked with FEMA as a survivor prior to that, because I was pregnant during Hurricane Hugo and pregnant during Hurricane Marilyn with my kids, outside of being a survivor, I was able to deploy and to assist other survivors. So that made me look into a career with FEMA, which started about 4 years ago. And when I started with the federal government, I started off as a GS4. When I accepted the position for FEMA, I changed from a GS employee. I was a GS7 and I got accepted for an IC11 position. I'm currently IC13 with FEMA. So there are several opportunities within this agency to get promoted. We're not the traditional permanent full-time employees. You have opportunities every 2 years to, you get your core, your PIN, your position renewed every 2 years. And it's continuous because there are a lot of disasters that we work with. So, you don't think like after 2 years that your employment will no longer be there. Or you'll have to find another position. Sometimes you do find another position. As you note from the one slide, there are 23 cadres. We work in hazard mitigation. Well, I work in hazard mitigation. So that's one of the 23 cadres. And within my cadre, we have over 20 titles. So I have titles like branch director, support specialists, management coordinators, grant specialists, floodplain management, insurance specialists, data integration specialists, support specialists. So, I have several different titles within my privy. I'm a cadre management team lead. So I'm a supervisor of record for maybe 100 people. Not all are full-time employees. The majority of them are reservists. So they're intermittent. I can't even tell you the number of employees that I have deployed right now, because we deployed several last week. So I will have to look that up to see. But our reservists, as a cadre management team lead, I work with both reservists and the core employees. The core employees are more permanent employees. So we deploy the reservists first because they're intermittent. The core employees will have a job no matter what. So, we'll make all efforts to deploy our reservists to different disasters, even if it's not within your title. If there's a title that the recovery section is looking for, and we could assist, we will assist. I also have special opportunities that some of my folks do get deployed to. And I looked for these opportunities during times of COVID because they were not deploying in person. So we're getting ready to close out one of our special projects that we have. Is building resilience, infrastructure, and communities. And it's a project that will be ongoing. I don't know how much you listen to the federal government and any of the news that comes out, but it's one of the new programs that falls under FEMA, where we're trying to go to or make a selection for impoverished communities in order to help them mitigate future damage from previous damages that they've had. So we've been working with tribal communities and a lot of the communities that are much smaller communities than you normally would hear of. So that is one of my special projects that I have had people deploy to. And I know Sarah asked about positions within FEMA that are not emergency managers. No matter what your position is in FEMA, once you sign up and you're working with FEMA, you're an emergency manager. And like my title, I'm a program analyst. My title is a program analyst, but when and if I do get deployed, I do registration intake. And it's like your position doesn't matter, your title doesn't matter, your grade doesn't even matter. You're going out there to assist survivors in any way or form that you can. And I think that's what I like about working with FEMA, working under this component, is that we're able to go out and meet them wherever they're at. And most of the time they're more resilient than we are, because how long can we last without electricity or internet or even water? Like some of the people that the survivors that I've been doing registration intake most recently for in Puerto Rico, and they haven't had electricity or running water for like 16 days now. So it's just being able to go out and assist any way that we can. I know I went all the way around and came back around, and hope I helped you, Sarah, to answer your question, that we do have several positions, even if most of our titles do say emergency manager, but you might have like a program analyst position, you might have a support specialist position, you might be grants. So every position that you could possibly think of, we do have within FEMA.
Yeah. And I got to say that, while we're talking about the recovery side of the house, on the response side, those that are immediately going out, there's so many different jobs within the organization, whether you're dealing with GIS to, again, logistics, supply chain operations, safety, you may distribution warehouses, contracting.
Search and rescue.
Yes, can't forget them. You guys are awesome, but it's like there's so many different things and different jobs that you can do. And you can find yourself, you may have somebody that does HR every single day, and then they turn around and they're like, okay, for my position task book, I do logistics. And so I'm going to go, I may get activated. And so people a lot of times may go pick a particular job that's totally the opposite from what they do every day just because they want to deploy. I've seen you see it often, and because they want to gain that skill set. I may have done logistics and contracting. I may have done executive assistance work, but guess what? I really want to be an EO. I really want to work, with alternative, disputes and stuff like that. So I'll volunteer to get a task book opened under that particular field. So if a deployment happens, I can go out and shadow somebody who's going to make sure, checking the box that I'm learning all of those things while I'm on deployment. And that's another reason that people like to go on deployments, because it gives them additional job experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing too that I liked, that when I deployed as a disaster survivor assistant, I worked specifically with disability integration. And disability integration, I mean, when we think about it, we don't think about like our sign language interpreters. So those folks went along with us, so it was just like building upon that team, so that we could go out and work with the people. We'll go out and work with the survivors, however we could. And I mean, we met people that needed a sign language interpreter. So there's no way that we could have done a registration intake without that.
We got a question in the chat. Deployments just sort of the plan. I've been on some where I was, hey, they were like, hey, you're going to American Samoa. I ended up, only reason I was there for as long as I was waiting for a flight out. And American Samoa gets like 2 commercial flights a week, and we were trying to get a military bird. I would have been there for maybe 4 days, and that's only because a storm passed the island. It wasn't a problem. It just ended up longer. And so if you get activated, and when they had another lady on here earlier, she was part of the IMAT, they go in first, so you'll have them, and then they'll have some support personnel. And the time I was going out, I was doing logistics. So I went out to deal with their logistics and multimodal transportation with them. We sat there before the storm, we sat there where the storm was going, and we sat there after the storm passed. And then we packed up everything and came back home. But if a storm actually hits, they may find themselves there, the IMAT may find themselves there before the storm, during the storm, and therefore a couple of weeks after the storm before it transitions to the main FEMA staff. And their different sets that are open up there, and they usually go out for like 30-day increments. You have the option to keep if they still need you, they'll ask you, it's like, hey, can I renew your orders to stay? It really depends on how it's written. Some of them, they might say you're here for 2 weeks because you're shadowing so-and-so. Because like I've been a trainer where I've taught classes here at FEMA. I've helped stand up what they call the transportation cadre here. So when I went out, I was certifying new transporters. So that's part of the reason when I first came, I was gone so much, because in order for those people to be certified in their job, they needed somebody that already was certified. And me being an instructor, I was out there, so I need to certify that they understood how to deal with an airfield, et cetera, and that kind of stuff. And that's for any job. And there's definitely jobs for bilingual speakers. Glenise was talking about that earlier, and we definitely need bilingual speakers, because it's, with our territories, it's critical. It's critical right now. I think you said you had people waiting for like an hour for you to get an interpreter.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm here. I have some notes on here. I'm like, espere. I'm trying to tell them, please wait for a Spanish interpreter, you know. And I sit on the line with them for an hour and a half. So like she was saying, you know, my job is a program analyst, but at night I am like a registration intake person. So right now, you know, we do get overtime for since we're activated. Um, and yeah, we don't have a lot of or enough Spanish speakers. And Spanish is just one of the specialty languages that we do, that they do translate for within FEMA. So we have a lot of our Spanish employees that are getting deployed to Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Fiona. It did not hit like the area that speaks a lot more English. It hit like the countryside where, you know, the language is mainly Spanish. And then I wanted to go back to how long are deployments and everyday jobs. So a deployment, like Shawnee was saying, it could last 2 weeks. But the longest that you can stay on any deployment is 50 weeks. And you can only stay on a deployment for 50 weeks because at the 52 weeks, that means that that becomes your home of record. So you're only allowed to stay out for 50 weeks. And during COVID, the reservist workforce was able to work remotely. They're no longer allowed to work remotely unless it's a special project. So you will have to go out in person if you do accept a reservist position. But we do have remote positions.
And that's key when she was saying reservist, because it's different when you're talking about your cadre, you know, your cadre and your permanent personnel. And also with that 50 days, you're not getting a set of orders that says you're going to be out there 50 weeks. It's constantly being renewed and you're accepting them. It's up to you to, after that initial time you went out there, if you say you don't want to stay, there's no harm, no foul. You've done your time. You know, they're not going to ding you because you don't want to keep staying out there. They're going to find somebody else and let them have their turn. So it's at that point, it becomes a choice that you've decided, you know what, I like it out here. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And you keep accepting the renewal of those orders. But at some point, you have to come back in order to be able to keep your residency. You also now have protections. President Biden approved it last week to where we have the same job protection. So if you have a job for a commercial company, for say you work for FedEx, but you've been activated by FEMA, your job is protected. It didn't used to be like that. So that's been a huge step for FEMA, because before we couldn't guarantee you had a job when you went back. You know, all we knew is we needed you and we need you now. And then remote positions, there are 100% remote positions in FEMA. Most positions I can say are, you know, when you have telework optional. And so some jobs may require you to come in twice a week. You know, some jobs may require you to come in once every 2 weeks. You know, other positions are like, I want you here every day. I don't know of anybody that does every day except for the like NRCC and the National Response Coordination Center. And that's because they're working shift work. And even then you still get your days off, but it's certain positions that they require a shift. So those positions, you're not going to hear about them teleworking unless it's something like we went back to COVID where they had to limit exposure. And even then they still have people in there. Okay. And okay, I see where you're at about the USA jobs. I'm gonna do a quick search and see if they have that out there. Yeah, I know it's a need. Glenise, didn't they have something about like for, I remember seeing something here recently where they were trying to hire more people to do the intake things for these forms? Do you remember seeing that email?
I haven't seen that.
It was something I saw, because if I could find it, we could at least post that information in the, I saw something, I'm trying to remember what it was, so give me a minute.
Registration intake.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember where I saw it. It's been a couple of weeks, but I think it was when the first storm hit, between the first and the second.
It's probably Fiona, because we're on day number, I'm going to tell you what day we're on for Fiona. day 20 of this activation.
Okay. I'm trying to see if I can find.
And I know that Puerto Rico will possibly be doing local hires. I just don't know. And that would be on USA Job. If it's a local hire type of job, you know, it will be on USA Jobs.
Yeah, but I did just do a quick search in USA Jobs for like Spanish, you know, just to see what would come up, and I'll post that in the chat. And that's like jobs throughout the federal government. Uh-oh, I know they don't think I'm going nowhere. Not right now. I'm sorry to see a DTS verification. That's what I was like. And see, and that's the thing, how we were talking about any of us can go anywhere. I'm like, I'm currently on leave. I'm only on because I came on for you guys today. Because Chip, there was, you know, he's out, so he needed some help. Let me see.
Yeah, and I'm deployed. But I still have to do my day job.
Yeah. You know, so and normally, and I could say like I this is the first being over here. Like I'm used to either I'm activated for deployment or I'm working my job. They don't normally have me do both, even though technically I still do both, but it's just, it wasn't a requirement. Let me see. Hold on, I'm trying to see what I can find. FEMA direct hires. Let's see. Local hire. No, that was New Jersey. Hold on. Maybe it was public assistance coordinator or compliance. I'm trying to find it. Let me see. Yes, they have it right here. Local hire customer representative bilingual. But I'll just I'm gonna put all of the local hires that I found for PR in the chat.
Okay. I saw how often are you away from home or expedited to be deployed each year? We can't determine that time. You know, we work disasters, so it's dependent on the disaster.
And it depends on your position. I mean, I know people that have been with FEMA for like 15 years and have never deployed, you know, where like me, I joined FEMA and I joined in November. I was deployed in January, you know, but I'm one of those people, I like to deploy. So, you know, it's not, you know, it's not the same, you know, like for me, I'm like, oh, I get to go somewhere. Thank God, you know, so, you know, it's different.
That's the military in us.
Yeah, you know, I like to go do things, do new things, and make my husband appreciate me with these 4 kids because I'm gone somewhere, you know. So that's what I would go. And yes, when you're deployed, you are on travel status and you get per diem. If you're someplace, you know, like when I go get my rental car, activate my government credit card, I pay for, you know, and go through the system, pay for my flight, pay for my hotel, you know, you get your regular per diem every day. You do your travel claims and make sure your stuff is paid on time. Because like I was telling another group earlier, I had no idea I could just come home like that because it was my first deployment. I would have stayed. I'd probably still been sitting in Flint because I didn't know. You know, my boss was calling me every 2 weeks, like, "You okay? You want to come home?" He didn't say, "Oh, you want to come home." He just kept asking me, was like, "Okay." And then finally, like 3 months into it, he asked me, "Did I not miss my family and want to come home?" And I was like, "I could just do that." And he was like, "Yes." That's when I found out that I didn't have to keep accepting them orders. I thought I did. I didn't know any better, but I was very new. I traveled a lot. I did pretty much every storm and fire and possible storm until like, when did Harvey and all them hit? Was it
2017?
2017. And then I got pregnant with my 4th child. And so I haven't deployed since then. And it's not, I mean, well, when I say deployed, I haven't went out like to a disaster. I've been activated to go teach, you know, different stuff like that. But I haven't been out working like I was before.
Yeah.
And working every day or days off, it just depends. Like at the beginning, you're probably going to work every day. As like once the first 2 weeks is done, you know, yeah, depending on how bad the disaster is. Now I could say with Irma and then we were working every day. I was like a zombie by the time, but I was traveling too. So I'll say that. And I was traveling from disaster to disaster to disaster. So probably in the first, between August and October, I didn't halfway know anybody's name. I was just a little bit out of it, but that was unusual circumstances because of my position. I was an instructor. I was a coach evaluator. I worked in the National Response Coordination Center. Plus, I was still deploying everywhere. So that's not normal. Yeah. It's like that's not a normal thing. Most people get their one job, you get activated, you doing that job, and they put you on a ship.
Yeah, I was on a ship for a whole month and I worked 7 days every week.
Yeah, see, those disasters are the only time I worked 7 days a week. The other ones, I worked 6 days a week at the beginning, and we had off like either Sunday or Saturday. And that was mostly because you're dealing with contracts, and they didn't want to keep paying them all that money when you had lows. So we would plan it to where it went like that. But after like the first 2-3 weeks, we would move down to like you have weekends off. It just depends on your position and what you're doing. And let's see. Yes, and those deployments, like the 3-week deployments, are pretty similar. Like for me, I would go from back-to-back deployment, or I keep getting activated, and that's the difference. Because like working in headquarters, and I have some specialized experience that made me a little bit different. Like some jobs, like for HR, they're like, what I need to see you here 24/7 for, because you already did our payroll and the purchase card. Same, it just depends on what you're doing. It really does. And it depends on if you're a reservist, if you're cadre, if you're a core or if you're a PFT. I've been both PFT and a core employee. Did I answer the question, or did that offer any clarity? Oh, let's see. Cool. And just to go back, I've probably been to the office maybe 6 times since this year, and I haven't been deployed at all. I didn't get deployed last year. Well, I take that back. I was deployed technically, but I worked night shift. So I was working night shift from home because of COVID. And then I eventually moved to a different job, and I haven't been deployed since. And that's why I said deployments can, depending on your job title, depending on your employment category, it could be, yes, you're flying to wherever that disaster is, or maybe, you can work from home. It really just depends on what you're doing and when they need you. And it also depends on, like, is it like a fire, a hurricane, a man-made disaster, or is this like contagion? So it just, COVID has really changed a lot with how FEMA operates.
Yep. And I'm deployed semi-resident. So when I get off at 5 o'clock, I start to work again, but a whole different job.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other last minute questions before we conclude? All right, I'm not seeing any. Shawnee, Glenise, did y'all have anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
I would just say that I appreciate you guys, considering FEMA, and me personally. I love the organization. I moved around the organization, and the only way I'll leave is if I just need to leave because I can't find a promotion in the area I want. And that's something that I've also learned about the federal government. People move from agency to agency, sometimes only to get promoted. Sometimes people leave because they just like, I don't like what I'm doing, or I don't like the agency. But FEMA is a very supportive agency, so I personally love the organization. And I love what we do. And I love the fact that we're here to help people. Like, we're really here to help people. It's not, I'll help you, but we're really focused on how we can help the American public.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I added our disaster personnel email box. If you wanted to apply for any hazard mitigation reservist positions, those are the positions that I hire for. Yes, I see that I hire for within my group, within hazard mitigation. But every of the 23 cadres, all the cadres have reservist program managers that can do direct hires for any reservist position. You'll just have to know who that contract person is.
And there was one thing I don't think we touched on any of them. If any of you have like any sort of teaching background or training background, look for like things like training specialists, because even though you may not be familiar with what that particular program is doing, you can learn, so they'll help you, they want people that can develop lesson plans, give presentations, be able to speak to, some small to large group of people and being able to help them learn. And those are if I had known about those jobs when I retired, that's one of the jobs I probably would have looked at.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Shawnee and Glenice, for staying on this entire afternoon, going through all the sessions. And thank you all who are still here for participating in today's Military Spouse Career Expo. I believe all of the recordings will be sent to the attendees as well as presentations. So stay tuned for that. And otherwise, I hope you all have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thank you. And we appreciate your help.
No problem. Happy to help.
All right. Bye-bye.